Then later in the show, Peter Wolf of the Geils Band joins us on his new memoir, It's All Ahead, on Boston.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. President Trump's 25% tariffs are in effect on imported goods from Canada and Mexico, but he has given a one-month reprieve to the big three U.S. automakers. The high tariff rates are still in place for nearly all other goods. The tariffs affect many industries. Jack Vesey is a produce grower in California. He says so far he has not seen any losses.
Any type of tariff or trade war, there's winners and losers. There's certain things that might be a positive for us. There may be some things that might be negatives. Concern on fertilizer price and some of our inputs. If those increase, that's going to put a damper on things. That's going to increase our cost.
Meanwhile, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says that he expects Canada and the U.S. to be in a trade war for the foreseeable future. Billionaire Elon Musk continues to oversee President Trump's efforts to overhaul the federal government with his Doge entity. Musk has stated an ambitious goal to cut $1 trillion in federal spending by the end of this fiscal year in September. But as NPR's Stephen Fowler reports, any major changes of that magnitude are supposed to be driven by Congress, not Doge.
For every dollar the federal government has spent so far since the start of this fiscal year in October 2024, Doge has claimed to save the equivalent of about 4 pennies. An NPR review finds those savings claims from actions like pushing agencies to fire workers and cut contracts are drastically inflated. But even if you take those numbers at face value, Doge's focus is on such a small part of the multi-trillion-dollar federal budget handled by Congress. About 2/3 of this year's federal spending has been on Social Security, Medicare, health programs, income security, and veterans' benefits and services. Most of what's left goes towards interest on the debt and defense. Stephen Fowler, NPR News, Atlanta.
Members of Congress grilled mayors from 4 Democratic cities yesterday for hours. They questioned the mayors about their policies concerning people who are illegally in the United States. NPR's Jimena Bustillo reports the mayors defended their use of taxpayer dollars to address the needs in their cities.
The mayors of Chicago, Boston, Denver, and New York were summoned to Washington to defend their so-called sanctuary city policies. Those policies generally limit local law enforcement from participating in federal immigration and customs enforcement activity. Supporters argue this preserves trust in local law enforcement and leaves federal law enforcement to federal agencies. Critics say there's a lack of cooperation bordering on obstruction and at odds with President Trump's goals to increase deportations. The Democratic mayors also said that much of their recent policy has been in response to Republican governors sending recently arrived migrants to their cities on buses. Jimena Bustillo, NPR News.
On Wall Street, the Dow is down about 150 points. The Nasdaq is down about 1%. You're listening to NPR News from Washington.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Authorities say it's still not clear if recent incidents of vandalizing Tesla vehicles and charging stations are connected, but they continue to investigate. We have more from GBH's Marilyn Scherer.
Brookline police say they found the man suspected of vandalizing Tesla cars earlier this week with stickers critical of Elon Musk. Dan Saltzman of Brookline says his Tesla was defaced with a sticker while parked outside his home, and he's angry about the damage to his vehicle.
Well, I just noticed a big sticker of Elon Musk looking like a Nazi stuck to my car and, not the type of sticker that you can remove.
Saltzman says most Tesla owners in Brookline have them for environmental reasons, not because they like Musk. Meanwhile, a $5,000 reward is being offered for information about a fire at a Tesla charging station in Littleton that was deliberately set. Marilyn Scherer, GBH News 89.7.
Researchers and scientists will gather in Woods Hole tomorrow to protest the Trump administration's cuts to science research. The Stand Up for Science rally, one of many planned across the country, will happen at Waterfront Park from noon to 1. Comes on the heels of a month where Trump administration cuts federal funding for science and fired thousands of staff across scientific agencies. Dr. John Holdren, who served as science advisor to President Obama, is a scheduled speaker in Woods Hole. He will address the impact of federal cuts on science, technology, and the Cape region as a whole. 54 degrees in Boston right now. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Capital One with the Capital One Saver Card. What's in your wallet? Terms apply. Details at CapitalOne.com. And the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation at macfound.org.
He's Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We're going to be at the Boston Public Library tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Today, we're going to be joined by Peter Wolf. I got ahead of myself. Tomorrow, we're going to be joined by former Washington Post and Boston Globe editor Marty Barron.
Peter Wolf is at 1 o'clock today.
That is correct.
Fine.
That is correct. We're very excited. Geils Band. Former climate czar and EPA head Gina McCarthy. Then Ask the Mayor is going to be next Tuesday. We're going to be talking a lot about the mayor today. And Ask the Governor and Ask the T's general manager next Wednesday, both at the library.
Could you repeat that, please?
I'm not repeating it.
Okay,
it's very
thank
long.
you.
Only
Appreciate
2 shows left until we are forced to talk about daylight saving time with Jim Browdy, who is obviously obsessed with that topic.
As are the American people, Marjorie.
Yes, that's right.
How are you?
Good, thank you.
Good. We're joined now on Zoom by Chuck Todd. Chuck hosts the Chuck Toddcast. You also know him as a political analyst, former longtime moderator of NBC's Meet the Press. Are you for year-long daylight saving time? You better say yes.
No, I'm not.
You're not?
I'm sorry. And you know what I would say is go spend some time in the Midwest. Go spend some time on the easternmost part of the Central Time Zone or the westernmost part of the Eastern Time Zone, and then tell me what you think of daylight savings.
Great point,
Well,
Chuck
if I may
Todd.
And I sit there, and I don't mean to. I don't look. There's a reason we tried it, and what happened was there was a lot of kids going to school in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
That's
with
right.
the sundown and all that stuff. Look, it is. We're not trying to get more time on the farm. All right, I take your point there. Which was the original.
Was.
And we're trying to save energy. There was a time we were trying to save energy. Although I would argue, the energy argument is still a good argument.
It is.
Right. The more light you have, the less energy you burn. So that's still a good argument. Look, I just think that you're not going to, it's easy for us because Marco Rubio's huge on this in the state.
He is, and Ed Markey. They were the co-sponsors.
And where we live on the latitude there, okay, it's easy for us to. We're not impacted as much by the time change where the sun is. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that the sun is so stubborn.
Can I tell you something, Chuck? If you listen to the show more, you would realize I solved the problem with little school children going to school in the dark.
Are you going to give them glasses?
No, I propose that they have taxpayer-funded little miner's hats with little lights on the front of the hats. So, get with it, my friend.
Well, look, as long as we're going to do that, and we're obviously need to expand child labor.
Yes.
Right, we need more. So maybe they could do some work. Right, do some nighttime work with those miners' hats, and then get on the bus to go to school.
We're talking to Chuck. Hey, we were going to start with this speech Tuesday night, but I should just say CNN is reporting, I assume everybody is, that Secretary Lutnick is saying tariffs on nearly all products from Mexico and Canada will likely be delayed. It's just...
Stock market was down again this morning.
I know the chaos is the point, but, this is, this sort of the lack of planning, the lack of stability, the increase in turbulence. People don't like turbulence. Okay, markets don't like turbulence. The public doesn't like turbulence. And what Donald Trump loves is turbulence. He enjoys living life on the other side of a railing on a 50-story building. Okay, he's very comfortable there. The rest of us aren't. Yeah. And this is why over time, all this is going to wear out the sort of tolerant middle. Okay. His base may love everything he's doing, but he's only been talking to his base. That was a speech Tuesday night that was just to his base. If it was a total missed opportunity, if you cared about things like, uniting the country and trying to actually build a larger movement. But he didn't even bother with that, right? This is some sort of spike the football term that he's decided to hold. And, it is not going to end well. And you can see all the warning signs already.
What?
Right? The
What?
markets hate this.
Yep.
People don't like what they've seen so far. Musk is unpopular. You're starting to see, I joke, Republicans are complaining that there are paid activists showing up at town halls. Let's say they are. Democrats are getting more people to show up for town halls then than they did for Kamala Harris rallies. Okay. So, it's one of those things that accept the premise that they're able to organize. They're able to organize, right? There is an opposition going, yeah, I'll show up to a town hall and harass a member of Congress. The fact that those folks exist is yet another, I think, flashing yellow light for the GOP.
I would like to ask a coherent question, but I don't even know what I think about this. You said chaos is the point. So we had the tariffs, and then the next day we didn't have the tariffs on automobiles from Canada and Mexico, and now we don't have the tariffs at all for a month. 2 days ago, they were going to shut down, I forget the number, 44 federal buildings, and including two major ones in downtown Boston.
Put them on for sale, and they were for sale for about 10 minutes on Redfin.
They're gone. They're not even on the website anymore. Is this all Trump? Is it intentional? Is it he doesn't give a damn because he likes chaos? I mean, I don't understand how anybody in that administration, including him, thinks this is a good way to govern.
Look, this is just the only way he's ever operated. He's never operated with a plan. He's never operated with blueprints. He is the king of break the eggs and figure it out later. And so when you create that environment, you attract people that feel as if they can get away with behaving the same way, right? Musk has done this. They've just run roughshod. Now he's meeting with Congress going, yeah, maybe we'll make a recommendation list of cuts and then you guys can actually give it some congressional authority. Somebody had the genius idea of trying to make the cuts constitutional. Wow, who could have thought that was a good idea? I mean, but I just think he sets a tone, and this is just, Trump has never run a large organization. People, he ran all of his businesses as 5 to 6 person shops, always has. Whenever larger sort of entities have developed under him, he's never really supervised them. And I think the federal government's one of the hardest thing to run as a family business, and yet he's kind of trying to do it that way, which is why you see all this what I would call unplanned chaos. It's sort of like it's planned, but only to a point. They don't think about the fallout from their initial execution.
Well, how much of this is about the stock market?
Well, I think that does rein Trump in.
Yeah.
And I think that Trump doesn't like being blamed for a fall in the stock market.
Right.
He loved the fact that he was getting all this credit. And, he made this crypto announcement the other day, and it's done nothing for that world.
Yeah. If
anything, crypto's gone down. And how he's done it, I mean, he has basically played to all the crooked stereotypes of crypto, right? He launched his own meme coin. He seems to be picking winners and losers of what gets into this supposed reserve of crypto fund that we're manufacturing. But what gets Trump off is being able to, oh, look, I made this decision and it skyrocketed. Well, it didn't skyrocket, right? And the stock market has been very uncomfortable with this tariffs. I mean, right now, apparently the best investment is buying the ruble. These days. So,
before we leave this about motivation, I think it's stock market connected too. A friend of Marjorie and mine texted me a headline from Vanity Fair, this morning. Elon Musk is now $111 billion poorer thanks to his best bro, Donald Trump's tariffs. Is possible that they just had a conversation and he said, this is really hurting me badly, buddy.
Well, tariffs hurt him more in China than they do in Mexico and
which
Canada.
He's not undoing.
Yeah.
Right. And he's not going to undo the China tariffs. So I think those are, the real question I have is how much lower does Tesla stock have to go before major shareholders demand that the CEO go back to work?
Yeah, there was a story today on Drudge about concern about, I forget where it was from, about concern about his ketamine.
I turned my Tesla in.
Did you?
And
no, you didn't.
I did because I did. I turned it in. I was done with my lease. I turned it in, and I don't want to drive a car that people think's a political statement. like neither positive or negative. Like I'm one of those, and this is, I think, the bigger problem that Tesla Boy has is I think there are a lot of people like me who are like, hey, I'm into the tech, I'm into the and it you know, but it's like I'm not here to make a statement by the car I'm driving. You know, I just don't want to do that. And around here, with all these federal workers that have been seeing their lives upended, you know, it's just like, you don't want to be a part of that.
So should I sell mine? A lot of listeners say I'm a total hypocrite and fraud.
Look, I think these things are very fraught with peril. I remember in college we didn't drink Coors.
I did.
Right?
Same deal.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? You know, we didn't drink Coors.
They were anti-union, for those who don't know.
That's right.
For
a while.
And then, of course, what happened? They became the first major company to give health benefits to same-sex couples. And you're like, okay, now what are you supposed to do? Right? Like, you know, but I would argue that the boycott worked, right? Where Coors said, hey, we don't want to be known only as a negative, and we want to show that we give a damn about our workers, and let's do this. And by the way, it's, you know, back then, what is it? You didn't drink Coors and you didn't go to Exxon. Right, because of that Alaska oil spill, if you remember. And then I think we couldn't buy Shell oil because I think they had business in South Africa. Do I have them all right? Do I have all our boycotts right, Jim?
Well, the concept is right, even if every detail may not. I don't know.
I was. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Chuck.
but I get the, you know, and Tesla's this round. Look, I'm still somebody that can't ever own a Mercedes because of anytime I see Nazi videos with the Mercedes logo in it, I can't. I can own a BMW or an Audi. It doesn't bother me. And you know what? I know they were just as involved in the Nazi effort, but I didn't see their logo everywhere.
There are other reasons why Marjorie and I can't own a Mercedes, but it's not a protest.
Look, Tesla boy, the fact that you own a Tesla means you can own a Mercedes. Don't even try that. Nice try.
You know, Chuck Todd, one thing I wanted to mention, I mentioned to Jim this morning on my favorite podcast, The Daily from the New York Times. They had a reporter on there who's done a lot of investigation of fentanyl in Mexico. And according to her reporting, that the Mexican government did really step up the crackdown on these fentanyl labs big time. And a lot of the fentanyl production, at least for this, in anticipation of these tariffs, is shut down. So it pains me to give Trump credit on something, but it does seem he deserves it.
The entire behavior of the Mexican government when it comes to cartels, they've done a 180.
Yeah.
I have to say, how do you sit there and say that Biden's policies were good? If a little strong arming, not a ton of strong arming, a little strong arming, suddenly they're like, oh, we've got some it feels like, it feels like round up the usual suspects, right? They said, here you go.
Yeah.
We'll give you some people and we'll do this. I think you can't look at what's happened with the relationship with Mexico and say that Trump's tactics aren't working.
Yeah, well, they seem to have worked with the cartels and with the fentanyl.
Far.
I learned this morning, like a little razor, a top of a pencil, pencil eraser thing of fentanyl is enough to kill you. I had no idea.
The problem with the fentanyl issue, it's China. They're the ones with all the ingredients.
Yeah. That's
where all the ingredients comes from. And unfortunately, just like what we found out when we stopped the drug trade in Colombia, you will stop the drug trade in Colombia, and then it moves elsewhere. We may slow down the fentanyl manufacturing in Mexico, but we all know it's going to go somewhere. We just don't know where that somewhere is.
It's a demand issue.
By the way, Jamie just says we're getting hundreds of texts coming in saying, quote, yes, sell it. So,
poor Jim.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Thank God.
Can we go back to the?
By the way, I had a lease, so I don't know what your situation is.
I own it.
And the Charger
it
issue.
Is other what do you call it? Other car companies, Tesla doesn't cooperate with them. It's sort of buying and selling and trading. So it's very hard to trade your Tesla. You're going to have a hard time.
Well, you know what Sheryl Crow did? She not only sold it, but donated all the money to NPR. Do you know that? So that was the start of this thing. So, Chuck, can we get back? We're talking to Chuck Todd, obviously. Let's get back to Tuesday night. I don't know this. Do you know Monica Hess, who writes for the Washington Post? I never heard of her until this morning. I feel bad about it. She wrote, even the headline's great. It captures this. Democrats, this is obviously intended to be sarcasm. Democrats sent a scary message with those pink outfits. Please tell me the Democratic lawmakers have a plan up their pink sleeves. Al Green, the guy from Texas who was kicked out, was censured this morning by the House of Representatives with 9 or 10 Democrats voting along with the Republicans. What was your reaction to what they did or didn't do Tuesday night, and also to their whole
James Carville's thing about roll over and play dead? His thesis about what the Democrats should do.
Look, there's Stephen Miller wrote a speech that was intentionally Stephen Miller, the person who writes most of Trump's speeches, particularly those that are on teleprompter. He wrote a speech that was basically, the type of speech that was trying to put Democrats in the proverbial position of, when did you stop beating your wife? Right. Which is they set up applause line. It was very smart how they delivered that address in this respect. If you are a well-informed voter, if you're a well-informed American and you listen to that address, you knew how much BS there was in it. And you're like, what is he talking about? That isn't true, and this or that. But if you don't know the details, what he was arguing for or claiming he was doing were not things that were 30% support, right? These were 60% ideas, right? Which is, secure the southern border, men should play with men, women should play with women on sports, right? But he knew, but these things do divide Democrats, right? They divide the party between some in the progressive end versus the centrist end. So it was brilliant in how it was stagecraft, where you were either going to make Democrats look silly by not applauding a cancer victim, or you were going to get them to applaud things that they were by policy uncomfortable with, right? The criminalizing migrants, things like that, right? So you have to sit there and realize that they were in a no-win situation. I don't think they fully appreciated that Trump was going to put them in a messaging box with what he was going to deliver. And the behavior of just a handful of Democrats played right into the messaging that the White House wanted to be able to say, hey, look, we're the mainstream. They're acting crazy. They couldn't even applaud a kid who we were giving an honorary Secret Service membership to, right? Or they couldn't even do this. And it was a pretty easy trap to see that was being set, and leave it to a handful of Democrats to walk right into it.
I surely don't have a strategy for them at all. But
I don't know what the right answer is.
Well, except it seems to me that the issues of the last few days could not be easier for them to play with. The tariff thing should be, Kamala Harris kept saying huge tax, whatever she said, $2,000 on a person. It's finally coming home to roost, which is intended as a pun, by the way, if you think about that for a minute. Social Security is a Ponzi scheme, Elon Musk says on Joe Rogan the other day. It's almost like all this crap is teed up for these people, but I'm not sure who it is or how they advance. Who is the person who says Seth Moulton told us the other day when we were asking the congressman, obviously from Massachusetts, we were asking about the Democratic response, and he said, I'm a big fan of Hakeem Jeffries. Well, I said, I haven't heard him say a word about anything. Well, he's working internally to unite the Democrats. Really? So who should be delivering this? Who are the them? Who should be delivering it?
That's the problem, right? You have Schumer and Jeffries, who essentially have divided caucuses, right? You've got those in swing districts or swing states that are not interested in pushing back too hard yet. And then you've got those that are in bluer areas or bluer states or safer districts or safer seats who are feeling worried that if they don't look like they're fighting, they're going to get primaried. The potential for a left-wing Tea Party, I think, is I would put in the sort of 60 to 70% possibility here, where you might get. I put it this way: I think if Democrats continue to look this feckless 3 months from now, 6 months from now, I think you're going to see a spike in two types of candidates. One will be people running as independents, and the second will be primary challengers to incumbents, to older incumbents. And I just, we saw it. By the way, we saw this when the rise of the Tea Party in on the right, where suddenly, at the time, you're like, wow, they have all this energy and they're actually going after their own. How come they're not going? Well, that's what happens when these movements happen, right? Mm-hmm. They don't just come for the other party; they actually come for the leaders, the sympathetic leaders on your supposed side of the aisle too. So, I think both of those are, especially if Democrats don't find their voice in the next three months. And look, it's possible. I think that Jeffrey's belief is Trump is going to hand us a message. And I think there are others that say, well, if you wait for Trump to manufacture your message, you're also ceding the information ecosystem to his people in the meantime, right? And I think this is the debate, which is 10 years ago, I think everybody would assume that, okay, this is going to end up with a disastrous midterm for the Republicans. But because of the daily fight that takes place about facts, right? And the right-wing information ecosystem is so aggressive at trying to create an alternative reality with what they're doing with Doge or what they're doing with the Trump administration. And the Trump administration lives online. So they're sort of live in this alternative reality cocoon. They don't live in this other reality-based world that I think the three of us at least reside in. And I think that Democrats not fighting over the facts every day on messaging could turn into a long-term mistake. And I think that's the debate the party's having right now internally.
Before you go, I'm sorry.
I'm about to sneeze.
About to sneeze. Why don't you
before
sneeze?
I sneeze.
I don't know if we ever asked you this, but before
Hold on,
you go.
I'm back.
Oh, you have something?
By the way, I think sneezing's the greatest thing our bodies do.
Okay, it's a wonderful thing.
Do?
It's a wonderful thing.
I love the feeling right after a sneeze.
But you look, okay, Jim always calls me a very superficial person. I am a superficial person. A lot of Americans are superficial people. You look at Trump's cabinet.
I think you're super, Marjorie.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Oh,
it's
God,
all a bunch of people that
lovely.
could be on television, right? They're all good-looking, attractive people. That the Democrats don't seem to get that they
Hakeem
need
Jeffries
to have,
is great looking if you want to be superficial.
He is not a guy you stop and watch on television.
And I love Al
Trump-
Green's music.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Is
Okay.
it wrong, Al Green? No, sorry.
They
Come on.
need
Somebody had to make that joke.
It's a good one,
somebody
actually.
young, good-looking, telegenic, charismatic. Which Donald Trump, you may not think he's good looking, but people stop to watch him. They need someone like that.
Okay, fine.
And I think that
Well, I would argue every time they go down that road, they get burned. Ask John Edwards.
well, he was a little bit too much of a pretty boy. You can't be that far. He was. A
You
little
can't
bit
be
over the
that
edge.
attractive. There's a line. Like,
Yeah, I
you
think
it's
he
like,
ca- I think
you're
he-
too
yeah.
attractive. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Well, I just
sorry,
think-
George Clooney. You're too attractive for the Democratic Party.
I thought of when they elected Conley from Virginia. Nice guy. He was good yesterday, but over AOC.
Be the
for the
ranking
committee.
Democrat
I think
over
maybe
Ocasio-Cortez.
she might have been more of a effective spokesperson than he was, I guess.
In any
Well,
case,
I also think that she has the bigger. What she has is an ability to talk to a portion of the electorate that Jerry Conley cannot talk to. I mean, I think that's the fact of the matter is maybe they're ideologically a little bit apart, but what's more important is who talks to voters under 40, not Jerry Conley.
well,
No.
let me just say, this is a cardinal rule for me. I don't know if the two of you will agree. When a leader of a party at a particular event looks like he or she was disinterred to come to the event, that's a real problem. Would you agree with that, Chuck Todd?
Well, how about, I mean, I don't mean to, Sylvester Turner, who just passed away,
From
is a
Houston.
freshman member of Congress at the age of 70.
Right.
Let me just start right there, right?
Yeah.
Freshman member of Congress. Like, the entire party feels outdated, right? It really does remind me, this really reminds me of the Democrats circa 1989, right after the Dukakis debacle. And the irony, the difference being that was like a real drubbing at the polls. This wasn't. And yet the way the Democrats are behaving is very similarly.
It's a very good point. By the way, we love Michael Dukakis, just for the record, to be complete. Chuck Todd, it's great to see you as always. Thanks so much.
Chuck, thank
Great
you.
to see you guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
See you
got
soon.
it. Next week.
We've been speaking, yes, every Thursday. We're very excited and very grateful.
He'll change his position on daylight saving time by next week. I'm pretty sure about that, by the way.
Wow.
I feel good about it.
Well, I know. It's that time of year when we all manufacture stories about daylight savings.
Yeah, we manufacture one every 6 months over here at Boston Public Radio. But thank you.
It's every 4 months and 3 weeks now.
Oh, sorry.
We don't do it by 6 months.
You're right.
We've had
You're right.
time zone creep, and that has made it even worse. Okay.
Goodbye, Chuck Todd.
Thank you, Chuck.
Cut me off.
We've been speaking with political analyst Chuck Todd, host of the Chuck Toddcast, available wherever you get your podcast. He joins us every Thursday. After a quick break, Boston had its moment in the national spotlight yesterday as the mayor of Boston, Michelle Wu, defended the city's immigrant-friendly policies before the House Oversight Committee. How do you think she did? You can weigh in next at 877-301-8970. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Jared Bowen. Coming up on The Culture Show, award-winning poet Tiana Clark. In her new book of poetry, she explores it all: divorce, the first black bachelorette, and the art world. Then it's pop-up bagels. They're popping up everywhere, earning a delicious cult following. And before there was social media, there was video artist Charles Atlas. He joins us to talk about his dizzying retrospective at the ICA. That's at 2 on The Culture Show, 89.7 GBH.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Safety Insurance, offering a variety of home insurance products to cover your home's increased value. You can ask an independent agent about safety insurance. Safety Insurance. We'll help you manage life's storms. And Boston Ballet, presenting Swan Lake. This timeless love story features thrilling dancing, masterful music, and breathtaking sets. On stage now through March 16th. Official tickets at bostonballet.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan and Jim Browdy, live from Brighton and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. After the 1 o'clock news, Peter Wolf of Geils and his own great solo career joins us about his terrific new memoir called Waiting on the Moon. We're live at the BPL tomorrow with former Washington Post and Boston Globe editor Marty Barron. He'll zoom in. Former climate czar and EPA head Gina McCarthy. She will physically be there, live music, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Yesterday, Boston Mayor Michelle Wu did her best to capitalize on her moment in the national spotlight, defending Boston's immigrant-friendly policies before the House Oversight Committee, and not only defending them, but going on the offensive, which I think was the highlight of the day. With a day to digest what happened, we wanted to take some time to hear from you and your reactions by phone or text at 877-301-8970. How do you feel Wu performed, besides the mayors of New York City, Denver, and Chicago, before the GOP crazies like Nancy Mace and Paul? My siblings want me kicked out of Congress. Gosar. Here's the little exchange between Gosar, he'll be first, and Mayor Wu.
We just heard we want a comprehensive immigration policy. How can you get a comprehensive immigration policy when you're defying it from the very get-go? You're building it on false premises and false tenets.
Respectfully, Congressman, you could pass bipartisan legislation, and that would be comprehensive immigration law. The false narrative is that immigrants in general are criminals, or immigrants in general cause all sorts of danger and harm. That is actually what is undermining safety in our communities. If you wanted to make us safe, pass gun reforms. Stop cutting Medicaid. Stop cutting cancer research. Stop cutting funds for veterans. That is what will make our city safe.
That was a pretty fine moment in my estimation. Our number is 877-301-8970. A couple of questions. Several. One, what did you think of Mayor Wu's performance? Two, what did you think of the whole thing yesterday? And thirdly, you may know there's a mayor's race going on. What impact, if any, do you think Wu's performance before Congress yesterday will have on that race against Josh Kraft? 877-301-8970. I have to say, I thought all four mayors did extraordinarily well. I think Wu did the best of all four of them.
The guy from Denver was pretty good.
Yeah, I thought the guy from Chicago was pretty good, and I thought even Eric Adams actually was pretty good. I'm not a fan of his, but I thought the difference, as I said a minute ago, is Wu did go on the offensive. She didn't just answer their questions with strength, which I think all four mayors did. She put them back on their heels.
Oh, yeah.
And when you juxtapose that with these lunatics, like that woman, is she from Florida, saying she's going to refer all four to the Justice Department for indictment. Marjorie Taylor Greene saying they're all guilty of treason. I think they stood out as four leaders that the country can be proud of, and people who care about their fellow human beings, regardless of where they're born, can be proud of. Our number is 877-301-8970. We want to know what you thought. What did you think, Marjorie?
I thought she was really good. I love the fact that we had a mayor of Boston with a 7-week-old baby nursing right there in the room before the hearings began. They took the 2-hour. I mean, it was not long ago, Jim, that you would be chastised and drawn and quartered for doing something like that. I thought that was great. I thought she really, it was Shirley Leung had a great column today.
She did have a
the
great
mayor's
column.
taken some criticism about hiring an outside law firm to help her at $9.50. If she got that help from them for $9.50 an hour, is worth it. I agree with Shirley about that.
I don't agree with that actually, but I thought she was really good
I do
yesterday.
because she was the only one that did go on the offensive. I mean,
all of them had lawyers. I mean, do you really think she had to pay $1,000 an hour to prepare
all I
for
know
this thing?
is that she's the only one that went on the offensive.
She was.
They did over and over again, and all of them did this, say, if you did your job, Congress people, we wouldn't even be here. Pointing out over and over again that Congress had the opportunity multiple times to do something about immigration, and they didn't. But I love the thing that she went back after Homan, the guy that says he should go to hell. I love the fact that she ended her opening statement pointing out that she is the daughter of immigrants. And by the way, under Trump's efforts to get rid of birthright citizenship, it's not clear if it's retroactive. But if it were retroactive, she'd have to be sent back to Taiwan, because she came here under birthright citizenship. But she talked about at the end of her opening statement.
Born here, didn't come here under birthright citizenship.
Huh?
Born here under birthright citizenship.
Yes, but if they were going to do a retroactive thing, which I don't think they could do, I don't think they'd be able to get rid of it at all. But if they were, she'd be gone. And here's the end of her opening statement when she was speaking in all these different languages, in English, in Spanish, Chinese, and Haitian Creole, and a nod to the big Haitian population here. Here she is.
You belong here. This is your home. Boston es tu hogar. Boston, c'est la caillou. 这是你的家. This is our city.
I mean, it was a pretty patriotic moment there.
Well, it's moving. It's
really felt really good.
877-301-8970. Can we focus on one other person, this congressperson? I missed this till this morning. Our colleagues pointed it out. Here's Representative Jasmine Crockett asking a pretty great rhetorical question of the mayors. Here's Crockett, and then you'll hear some of the mayors and Crockett.
Have any of you been made aware of any immigrant that has had 34 felony convictions that has still been able to roam around in your cities? Anyone?
No, ma'am.
34 felony convictions.
No,
from the
Congresswoman.
immigrants. Anybody?
I'm not aware.
Oh, okay. I'm just curious because we are so concerned about crime, and I know that my Republican colleagues would never want anybody with 34 felony convictions roaming around because that could be a danger to the community, but I will move on.
Well, I think that was a pretty good one. 877-301-8970.
A lot of people were really nervous about this. People were talking about how they were gathering in churches, St. Paul's Cathedral, for praying for the mayor. Saint Cecilia's praying for the mayor. Of course, she had her ashes on for Good Friday. So it was a good picture. She got the cross on her forehead. She didn't have to wear the cross around her neck like all these fake Christians are wearing. And she had the little
Marjorie's
baby there.
talking about people like Laura Ingraham and the press secretary, Carolyn Levitt.
She hasn't worn it lately, though. I'll give her credit for that.
Can I, one last, well, actually, let's hear what the listeners had to say. 877-301-8970. Your reaction to the whole deal yesterday, your reaction to Mayor Wu's performance or the other mayors. And again, finally, there is a mayor's race here. What impact, if any, will this have on the outcome come the fall? Let's start in Auburn with Jason. Hi, Jason. Welcome.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm a longtime listener.
Great.
Thanks for
And
calling.
my comments about Michelle Wu, she's a real fighter. She didn't back up an inch. That was an ambush session from the conservatives that really wanted to create YouTube fodder for their home base. She spoke in several languages, which I'm sure just drove those people crazy.
I agree with that
She was
point.
extremely detailed, very comprehensive, and actually was extremely clear about what she stands for and what she's doing in Boston.
Jason, thank you for the call. Here's a little bit more of Mayor Wu yesterday, which I also did not hear live. Here's Wu responding to questions from Republican Congressman Nick Langworthy and John McGuire.
Mayor Wu, the other day you stunningly expressed sympathy for the man responsible for the knife attack, not the brave officer who stopped him. Where is the sympathy for the men and women in law enforcement trying to keep us safe?
Congressman,
Where
check your
is this?
facts.
It's my time.
Check your facts. Watch the video.
It's my time.
I did not express sympathy for that
Where is the
individual, but for
sympathy
their
for the
family.
victims?
And any individual
I haven't
whose
asked
life
you a
is
question.
lost.
Mayor Wu, in the Boston area alone, Tom Homan said there are at least 9 accused child rapists.
That is
who local
inaccurate. That is
authorities-
false.
My time.
That is false.
Local
I'd like
authorities
to see the
refused to
facts
turn
on
over
that. Again,
US
put him under oath and ask the
Customs
questions
enforcement.
here.
Put him under oath and ask the question
I
here.
love that she interrupted these people because half of them are so...
Yes or no? Yes or no? Yes or no?
Yes or no? And half of them didn't know what they were talking about. They didn't seem to understand the difference between a civil infraction and a criminal infraction.
You know what happened when
or they're
something?
pretending they don't know.
A lot of us do this in life and make a big mistake. When you have a great triumph, like and I use the term in quotes, like the Republicans had under Elise Stefanik and Virginia Fox, with the 3 university presidents who were ill prepared to be confronted in the way they were. The feeling is we can keep doing this over and over again. The mayor's learned a lesson. Other people are going to learn a lesson. Wu particularly learned a lesson. Is not only don't let yourself be bullied, don't let them interrupt you if you have something to say. And she just kept pushing forward. And I think, whether you're a Wu fan or not, I hope people felt pretty good yesterday about somebody who's a fact-based politician. Again, even if you don't like her policies, standing up to bloviators, to blowhards.
Our colleague Shirley Leung, see what she called her?
No.
A badass.
No, did she in her column?
She said she was fierce, formidable, and fearless, and that was her last night. She was talking about the reaction online, and one that instantly got a lot of comments was followed by this reaction, badass.
Let's go to Mary in Waltham. You're next. Hi, Mary. Welcome.
Hi, Jim and Marjorie. Long-time listener.
Thank you.
I thought Wu did a very good job yesterday. We are a very safe city, but I think that has to do with community policing here. The churches have gone along and gotten into the police have gotten into with the churches, kept the crime down. But what I didn't like
Mary, in fairness, we've had community policing when we had well over 100 homicides a year. I mean, I was a reporter for the Herald for a long time. Community policing is not what's done it
alone.
Certainly, yeah.
Go ahead, Mary.
What has done it? What has done it then, Marjorie?
Maybe we have better police officers now. Maybe we have a better crime has come down under Evans and the last guy before that, and it came down under Cox. But it's not just community policing because that started back in the 90s, Mary.
Yeah. But go ahead, Mary.
Okay. Well, I believe that the Trump organization and the czar there is going to come into Boston because do you believe that if the police in Boston arrest someone and ICE asks them to hold them till they come to pick them up, do you believe that Wu has a responsibility to hold and notify ICE to pick up that person?
Mary, can I make a suggestion? I would suggest you read the law that she is complying with called the Trust Act. And the answer to your question is if they've committed a crime and ICE has a criminal warrant, she will do exactly what you suggest. The law prohibits law enforcement in our city, prohibits them from turning over or continuing to detain somebody if they have no criminal violation on their record.
Besides
so with all
coming
due
into the
respect,
country.
You're suggesting that they should violate the law and Wu should violate the law, and she's not willing to do that. Mary, thanks for the call.
But this is the thing. This is what they were confusing yesterday. They were either they didn't know or they were just willfully confusing criminal versus civil. That's what they were trying to do. And
I think
that's
that's
why
a
they would
fair point.
confuse people like Mary. I mean, as we just talked about with Chuck Todd. I mean, Trump lies over and over and over again. The people that work for him lie over and over and over again. So if you're not sitting there Googling everything they say, you may not know it. Frankly, I think that is a big mistake. I think they should simultaneously fact check. So when he was lying about Social Security and the people that were 110, 120, 150 years old getting all that money, that was not true either. It was a weird way.
Well, he didn't specifically say they were getting money. He implied. The takeaway would be they were getting checks.
He went right through.
Right.
110 years old. 120 years old, 140 years old. Those people, there's no death for those people, and they shut off the money anyway, death or no death, at 115 years old.
Greg in Boston, welcome to the show. Hi, Greg.
Hi, Jim. Hi, Marjorie. Regular listener,
Thanks.
Occasional caller.
Thank you.
I just wanted to point out, not only did Mayor Wu do, I think, a really great job, my congressperson, Ayanna Pressley, also spoke up well. She really showed Comer to be the unqualified person that he is to be chairman.
The chair, right.
The second thing is having Mayor Wu, who has a Harvard law degree, being lectured about details of the law by the likes of Representative Luna and Marjorie Taylor Greene. My God. So I'm really proud. I'm really proud to be a Bostonian today and of my representative.
Greg, thanks for making both those comments.
Marjorie Taylor Greene said she was treasonous. She should be held for treasonous causes, and Luna said they should be investigated at the Department of Justice. But who knows? They might be investigated by the Department of Justice because if Trump wants them
That's a very good point.
They'll be investigated whether they broke the law or not. But I didn't mean to come down so hard on Mary. I think that you could be really confused because the Republicans confuse people.
No, I thought your point was since community policing has gone on for 30 years, if a mayor, if the homicide rate had gone up under her, it's her fault. And if it went down under her, which it has, she deserves some credit. So I think she was just trying to take credit away from Wu, which I don't think is fair, but nor did she understand, with all due respect, how the Trust Act works.
Lauren in Marblehead, thank you for calling.
Hi, Lauren.
Hi.
Hi.
So yes, I've been the biggest fan of Mayor Wu. I think she's one of the few politicians we can just be so incredibly proud of. Long before yesterday, and yes, a badass indeed she is, with such grace, which is really a nice combo platter. And I guess I was she was extraordinary yesterday, and I was a little surprised. I went on social media last night, and I was doom scrolling, and I was any posts about Mayor Wu's time yesterday. I read through all the comments. I often do that to sort of just understand the pulse of people, and I read there were probably like 5 different posts about this, about her testimony, and no exaggeration, I was flabbergasted because probably 90% of the comments were absolutely hateful, disrespectful, and just didn't like her.
Did you say you were surprised?
The crime rate.
What?
I kind of am.
Well,
I kind of am. You know, I was wondering because I just think she's so exceptional, and I just was so. I was really surprised. Well,
social media, I think for the most part, is not very friendly to progressive politicians or people, Lauren.
Although, you know something, Lauren, I haven't looked since this morning, but this morning when I was like reading the paper, 6 o'clock in the morning, the comments in the Globe were pretty favorable toward her.
I'm shocked by that, too.
Yeah, which is not typical, because usually the comments in general are horrible, but they were pretty good.
Lauren, thanks for the call. By the way, 2 things. One, we've said this, but I want to be clear. Mayor Wu will be with us for an hour on Tuesday, so if you want to react directly to her, she'll be with us at the library live from 11 to 12. You want to also, I've asked, no one's picked up on this, which is totally fine, what impact do you think it'll have on the race? You know what I would have done if I were Josh Kraft last night? I would have praised her performance. I would have said she did terrifically well. We have a lot of policy disagreements, but on this, I'm proud that of what she did yesterday. I think it would have been a good move because I think that seems to be maybe not universal feeling, but an overwhelming feeling that it was not only a good day for Wu, but a really good day for Boston.
Well, you know what our colleague Shirley Young said about that?
I didn't read that far.
He couldn't have done it.
Well, she's been doing this for a long. In all fairness, she's been in government for year after year as city council and here, and obviously the experience showed yesterday. Peter, I'm sorry. Peter, 1 second.
Though, if you think of the politicians that you've interviewed in your life and the I've interviewed in my life, there are a couple of people that stand out for knowing everything.
Yeah.
One of them is Charlie Baker.
He knows a lot.
And the other one is Michelle Wu.
Yeah.
I'd
say Deval Patrick, pretty smart guy who knew the answers to almost
Patrick,
everything,
but he was more of a, coming from corporate America, he was more of a new guy in town. Some of those things that drive people crazy, which you had no necessarily think that drove people crazy, like
I wasn't a lack of knowledge.
Details.
No, but I wasn't a lack of knowledge. He just had a different perspective than you, for example, on police details.
But police details drive people nuts.
Yeah.
And I think he didn't think that was a big thing. And so I think she's
I wonder who the first governor to ever cut back on police details was.
Well, I harassed him constantly about police details. Not enough. They didn't cut back enough.
Peter in Berlin. I don't know if you're either in Berlin or Berlin, depending on the state. Hi.
Berlin, Massachusetts. How are you?
Welcome.
So you, with a caller, 2 callers ago, talked about the law prohibiting the police from detaining folks that haven't got an arrest warrant. If you could please address the fact that is state law, which conflicts with federal law, and expand on that. That would be helpful.
It doesn't. Well, I'm happy to comment. It doesn't conflict at all with federal law. These are if there is not a criminal offense and there's not a criminal warrant, in which case the city will comply. The city is violating no state law. I watched hours of this hearing yesterday. I would assume you did too, Peter. If they thought that they could, with language, not rhetoric, show that was violative of federal law, they would have said it. But they didn't because it isn't.
They did say it, and they were lying.
No, I'm saying with no content, just rhetorical excess. So respectfully, Peter, it's not violative of federal law. And if it was violative of federal law, I would assume that bully Tom Homan would go to court and try to get a judgment against the city. He hasn't because it isn't. Peter, thanks for the call. 877-301-8970. And by the way, it's not called the Trust Act elsewhere, but as I said yesterday during the testimony, it sounds like Denver, Chicago, and New York City have laws that are very similar to this about where they'll cooperate and where they won't cooperate.
We're getting very favorable comments here at the Boston Public Radio show, Jim. She was the bomb, made those idiots look like pathetic losers, which of course they are. Love where Mayor Wu, very prepared. By the way, my calls never seem to go through. That's something else. Sorry about that the calls don't seem to go through. Please let...
okay.
I'm not going to read any more of these because this is about Peter Wolf and not about Mayor Wu.
Well, we'll read that at 1 o'clock when Peter's in the studio. Ben and Brewster, you're next on Boston Public Radio. Hi, Ben.
Hi. So I just my comment is related to the second to last comment about social media, and I plugged into TikTok and the comment section. And first of all, I just say Michelle Wu clearly really has a good social media team because she was firing videos left and right of the coverage. And
on Blue Sky, not on Twitter, right?
I was on TikTok, and
TikTok.
I then started following her on TikTok.
Okay.
So I agree about definitely a lot of hateful comments, but my comment, which was basically Homan picked on the wrong city. This is an example. It got something like 1,100 likes, and then the hateful comments followed. And I think with these comments, I know people are afraid to kind of engage on social media, but you really just have to stonewall that and just kind of follow Michelle Wu's lead and just comment back, clap back, tell these people what it is. It's hateful. And the point of my comment is I think we need to do a little bit less of like the Hakeem Jeffries kind of passive approach of things and actually really start to get in the fight and actually, clap back about these hateful comments.
I like that a lot, Ben. I'm glad you said it. I agree with you. Thank you kindly for your call. 877-301-8970. Yeah, we're getting a lot of support for Michelle Wu on the text line, Jim. Amazing, badass. So proud of our mayor, proud of our city and state. I may not feel great about being an American anymore, but I'm definitely proud to live in New England. You know what's also incredible? She was concise, fiery, prepared, and represented our values in Massachusetts. Something that is really distressing, and people are going to say, really, Jim, do we need to hear this? Well, I'm saying it anyway. The fact that people who disagree with him on that committee, the Republicans, cannot ask a civil, direct, fact-based question.
Mace?
I was grotesque.
How about Nancy Mace?
Do you hate Donald Trump more than you hate love America? Whatever that thing was.
Yeah, do you hate Donald Trump more than you
Why
love
did
your
she ask that
country?
question? Why did she ask that question? I'll tell you why she asked that question.
Why?
I'll ask you another
just
question.
To make Trump happy?
Exactly. And when Trump was walking into the House, who was the only person who attempted to hug him
that was
as
weird.
he's walking down the aisle?
And he didn't.
Well, he did, but half-assed.
Yeah.
Nancy Mace.
That's weird.
It is a total performance for the President of the United States and a disgraceful question. It is fine in good faith to criticize these mayors on the merits if you disagree with what they're doing. Do it on the merits. Do it fact-based. Don't perform for Donald Trump. Also, the chair of this committee, Comer, I said this yesterday, puts out a press release beyond that video that was disgraceful, the burning of the Declaration, I forget if it was the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution, to, in the press release announcing the hearing, talk about these pro-illegal alien mayors was the terminology that was used, who have reckless disregard for the law. Well, why do you need a hearing? If it turns out you know all those things, maybe you should ask a question and then, based upon their answers, draw conclusions. And by the way, one of the reasons why I think this is not taking anything away from the mayors or Wu were so good is because the Republican questioners were so pathetic, were so unimpressive with very few exceptions.
Well, as we mentioned yesterday, that guy Paul Gosar, even his brother said he was a disgrace.
All of his siblings said that he should be kicked out of Congress. That's what they said. It's 6 out of 9. Zoe corrected me. Thank you.
Okay.
3 of them apparently
6 out of 9.
don't want him kicked out of Congress. Only 2/3 of his siblings.
Was it unanimous with RFK Jr.? Was it the entire 11, however many there are? Well, I think they've lost a couple of those children, actually.
Other than the children they've lost. Okay. The other ones, the living children.
And his cousin, Caroline Kennedy.
Well, that had a huge impact.
Had no impact at
Good
all.
for her,
he
though.
said, she called him a predator, said he
Can
was
I say one thing
dangerous?
about that, by the way? I don't think we've had time to say this on the air because we went right from that speech by Trump into the mayor's testimony yesterday. After Donald Trump said drill baby drill and did his pro-fossil fuel thing at the thing, he obviously got a standing ovation. A man who spent his whole career, other than being anti-vaccine, doing I interviewed him years ago when he was doing good work on environmental stuff. I had him on Greater Boston. This is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Stands up and applauds his boss for saying we should drill, baby, drill, screw clean energy, screw climate change. And Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is willing to lower himself to the point where he's basically willing to say, screw everything I believed in my whole career just so I can make this one man happy. We're going to, by the way, as I say, we have Mayor Wu in here on Tuesday. And if you want to address your comments, pro, con, whatever, about what she had to say yesterday directly to her, you can either text, call, or come to the library from 11 to 12 next Tuesday.
Okay, that is.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And Addison Gallery of American Art, presenting June Leaf, Shooting from the Heart, a retrospective spanning the dynamic artist's entire career, with an opening reception March 29th, on view through July 31st. AddisonGallery.org. And the Massachusetts Health Connector for Business. New premium value plans can help small business owners find and offer accessible employee health benefits. Learn more at mahealthconnector.org/business. And The Huntington, presenting The Triumph of Love, Marivu's beloved classic where mistaken identities, hilarious complications, and deeply felt desires collide. On stage March 7th through April 6th. huntingtontheater.org.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Jim Browdy, ahead of an hour two, Boston Public Radio. A rebuke to Trump from the Supreme Court. They've ordered him to unfreeze billions of dollars in foreign aid. We'll talk about this and parse through some of the real numbers beyond the first few weeks of Trump's immigration crackdown narrative.
I'm Marjorie Egan. Then Boston University's Anthony Jack walks us through what might be ahead for the education department as Trump and his administration say they have plans to thoroughly dismantle it. Plus, the efforts today to maintain diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives in schools. All that and two more things next on the second hour of Boston Public.
Lakshmi sang. President Trump is expected to issue an executive action calling on Education Secretary Linda McMahon to begin dismantling the Department of Education. The White House says no such executive order will be signed today. Here's NPR's Corey Turner.
A draft of the executive action obtained by NPR calls on Secretary McMahon to act to the maximum extent appropriate and permitted by law to begin unwinding the Education Department. NPR reported the action's existence a month ago, but it was held until after McMahon's Senate confirmation. On Monday, after that vote, McMahon said in a message to department staff that helping her close the department was, quote, an opportunity to perform one final unforgettable public service. The department's primary role in K-12 education is enforcing civil rights laws and sending money to help schools educate low-income students and children with disabilities. Corey Turner, NPR News.
President Trump has announced on social media he will exempt more imported goods from Mexico from his 25% tariffs on Canadian and Mexican goods until April 2nd, which is the date Trump has said he wants to start reciprocal tariffs on goods from a wider range of countries. Meanwhile, some Canadians are choosing not to travel to the U.S. after Trump's recent verbal attacks on their country. NPR's Joe Hernandez reports many residents bristle at the new U.S. tariffs against Canada and Trump's wish to make Canada the 51st U.S. state.
Some tourism industry leaders say they're already seeing cancellations by Canadian travelers who are choosing to skip the U.S. in response to Trump's recent comments. One of them is Vancouver attorney Lena Yousefi, who recently called off a family trip to Hawaii.
Obviously, out of loyalty to Canada and our values and just holding our grounds, unfortunately, we had to cancel.
Canada sends the most foreign tourists of any country to the U.S., and the U.S. Travel Association estimates that even a 10% drop in Canadian tourism would cost the U.S. more than $2 billion and 14,000 jobs. Joe Hernandez, NPR News.
The U.S. House has voted to censure Democratic Representative Al Green of Texas over his protest during President Trump's address to a joint session of Congress 2 days ago. Speaker Mike Johnson read the vote tally this morning.
On this vote, the yeas are 224, the nays are 198, with 2 answering present. The resolution is adopted. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
10 Democrats voted with Republicans to approve Green's formal reprimand. On Tuesday, Speaker Johnson ordered Green removed from the House chamber after he repeatedly disrupted Trump and refused to sit down. U.S. stocks trading lower this hour with the Dow down more than 400 points. It's NPR.
Good afternoon with the latest from the GBH Newsroom. I'm Henry
Pharmaceutical
Santoro.
company.
Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey made an appearance on Late Night with Seth Meyers last night, telling stories about her past and what her thoughts are on President Donald Trump. As Attorney General for Massachusetts, Healey filed several lawsuits against Trump and his administration, and now, as governor, she's been making her case to national audiences, commenting most recently on Trump's address to a joint session of Congress.
What really bothers me, Seth, as the governor, every day I'm trying to deliver for folks in my state. How do I lower costs? How do I build more homes? How do I make sure they have access to health care and good schools? And I didn't hear him say anything about the needs of everyday Americans and how he's going to do any of those things.
Governor Healey stood by Boston Mayor Michelle Wu as she claimed a moment in the national spotlight yesterday as well during a fiery congressional hearing. The town of Falmouth has 3 baseball fields, and they are all closed due to high levels of lead in their topsoil. Cape Cod Times reports that the soil was tested after workers installing lights discovered metal and glass in the dirt. Town officials say all 3 fields will be closed for at least 2 years while they address those problems. In sports, the Bruins are at Carolina tonight for a game against the Hurricanes. Celtics host the 76ers at the Garden. Exhibition baseball, Red Sox play the Toronto Blue Jays this afternoon. Cloudy, windy, upper 50s today. Clear, windy overnight, low in the 30s. Sunny, windy, mid-40s tomorrow. Then more of the same for Saturday. 55 in Boston right now. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include BetterHelp, committed to supporting mental health through therapy. Clients are matched with one of 30,000 therapists and can communicate via video, chat, or phone at betterhelp.com/public.
Houston Friday, I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Peter Wolf from the Geils Band is going to join us around 1 o'clock today. He's got this great memoir we're going to talk to him about. And a couple of programming notes. We will be at the Boston Public Library tomorrow with former Washington Post and Boston Globe editor Marty Barron, former climate czar and EPA head Gina McCarthy. Then next Tuesday, Ask the Mayor and Ask the Governor and Ask the Tees General Manager on Wednesday. It's going to be a big Ask next week, Jim. And, of course, only a handful of shows until we're stuck having to talk about daylight saving time again.
Oh, my God.
Hello again, Jim.
Can I just say one thing before we introduce Andrea? Here's the headline on, it just disappeared from CNN. Trump says, I don't know what the verb is, repealing, whatever, most new tariffs, suspending, thank you, Zoe, on Mexico. And then it goes on to say, but he doesn't mention Canada, even though a chief aide of his earlier this morning said that most tariffs on Mexico and Canada were being. So he not only does a 180 on himself, but then he apparently doesn't even, it's unbelievable. Hello. I said hello. Did I say hello to you?
Not yet, but that's okay.
Oh, here she is. Okay.
Hi, Andrea.
Here with us on Zoom is former Suffolk County Sheriff, former Secretary of Massachusetts Public Safety from Massachusetts. She joins us weekly. Now I'll say it. Hi, Andrea.
Hi, Jim. Hi, Margie.
Hi,
Hi, Andrea. I goofed up. I can't see you, but I'll probably be able to see you pretty soon.
This is going well so far, I think, for both of us.
So, Andrea Cabral, we just talked to our listeners about the hearing with Mayor Wu and the 3 other mayors yesterday about immigration stuff around here, and I'm just wondering what you thought.
Well, I literally couldn't sit through the hearing.
I knew it.
Because I'm actively trying to reduce my risk of a stroke. But I watched clips afterwards, and I've read a great deal about it. From everything that I've seen, she did exceptionally well. I mean, let's face it, it's hard to even find words to express how galling it must be to have to go before this rogues gallery of insurrectionists, election deniers, quislings, people, one of whom, Jim Jordan, has been in defiance of a subpoena he received over a year and a half or 2 years ago. I mean, you literally are going before people who themselves have actually either disgraced the country, violated their oath, or actually possibly committed crimes against the country. And they're asking you about one of the safest major cities in the United States.
How come they never held him in contempt?
By the way, if you're watching the streaming,
been a good idea?
This is John Parker,
John
who's
Parker's
attempting
here fixing my
to
computer.
assist Margie for saying, who is this person?
Yeah, this is John Parker.
Is on my screen.
John
Hi,
the Claw
John.
Parker, as he's otherwise known.
Hi, John.
Yeah, who runs the board.
They never censured Jim Jordan for the same reason that they did censure Al Green and didn't censure Marjorie Taylor Greene, who screamed at Biden during his State of the Union address, or Joe Wilson, who screamed, "You lie," at Obama.
Very good
It's
point.
because it is just, they are not governing the country in any sort of way. They are strictly partisan, strictly sort of doing Trump's bidding, and they're all playing to an audience of one, which, as I say, violates the oath they swore to uphold. But there's a reason why, there's a saying that says you never get in the mud and wrestle with a pig, because you get dirty and the pig likes it. And I think Michelle Wu, part of this is her equanimity. She's a very even person, a very level-headed person, very logical. And she was able to show that. Also demonstrate pride in the city of Boston and what it has accomplished, but she didn't back down. She wasn't polite to the point of being walked over. She fired back at them, but she did it in a way that was consistent with her personality. And in so doing, she played up, didn't play up, but she sort of highlighted just what a clown show the whole hearing, was, and what Republicans were trying to do. So I think she made her points. I think she made them well. I was proud of her.
Even though you didn't watch. So I want to try to do so. I've been trying to get this mayoral race ginned up on this radio show totally unsuccessfully. In part, for the first time it's ever happened in our whole career, Josh Kraft is not coming on the show. I have no idea why. We've never experienced that before in governor, Senate, any races. But in any case, what I said before, you've run for office successfully. This was a major day for Boston. If you want to be head of Boston, you have to say something. I think a good move for Kraft last night would have been to say, by the way, we have a lot of policy differences. There'll be plenty of time to debate these through the preliminary, if there is one, or November, if there isn't one, whatever. But I just want to say, Mayor Wu did our city proud last night. She represented our city well, etc. Shouldn't he have weighed in and said something in light of the fact that I think it's pretty clear the majority of people in Boston felt pretty good about that thing?
Yeah, I agree with you. I did read where he offered some criticism of her, and that he said something not critical of what she did at the hearing, but critical of how she's been as mayor. At the same time, he pointed out that he didn't agree with the hearing and so on. But I agree with you. I think that there are times when you just need to really kind of do and say the right thing. And Michelle Wu was strident in her defense of her city. She had the facts to back it up. She suggested that Congress check its facts. They were actively misquoting her, lying about various things, and she pushed back. And I think anybody who lives in the city or wants to represent the city should have been proud of that yesterday.
We're talking to Andrea Cabral.
So it turns out that the mass deportation that Trump campaigned on is not happening yet, although there have been some very high-profile cases of people being hauled off. And this data that we are reading from United States Immigration and the New York Times says that 16% of those people who have been detained since Trump's been in office committed the crime of coming across the border, but that's it.
What percentage? I didn't hear that.
16%.
16.
So that's a significant number of people who are just here, came across the border, but they didn't, rape anybody or rob anybody's car or anything like that. I was surprised the number was that high, but maybe that was foolish of me.
So
I think I'm not surprised by it. Jim, did you want to say something?
What's the question? What are you asking, Andrea?
I'm asking about the mass deportation. Hasn't happened, but significant numbers of people who have committed no crimes except for the crime of coming across the border are getting picked up by ICE.
Yeah, I think I start here, that everything that this administration does this time, like the last time, is purely performative. They will not only do things in order to increase numbers and statistics to their liking, they will actually fabricate them. So it doesn't surprise me at all that two things are happening. One, it was a lie that they were only looking to take people into custody who had committed crimes. That's not true. They clearly want to deport anybody who's come over the border, regardless of how they behaved once they've gotten here. And two, the numbers themselves, the number of people, and keep in mind, they're holding some of these people down in Gitmo.
I thought they let them out. Didn't they let them out at Gitmo? I thought they let him out.
I thought they may have let him out.
Oh, well, I'm sorry. I stand corrected. I hadn't heard that they
But they did
out.
ship some
They
there.
shipped him to Gitmo.
The idea that was even contemplated, let alone executed, is absolutely horrific. But the fact that what they want to show people is that they're doing the thing that they knew going into this, they wouldn't have the capacity to do. The reason that there are 4,000 more people being held, regardless of what they're being held for, and as you point out, 16% haven't committed a crime since they've been here. The fact that they're holding 4,000 more people is not only a testament to the fact that they just want to pump up the numbers of people that they're taking into custody so that they can say to people, look, we're moving this mass deportation. It also points up the folly of the fact that they have dismissed administrative law judges and other judges who do immigration hearings. They don't even if they could do it, they don't have the capacity anymore because the one side doesn't know what the other side is doing, and neither side has a clue as to how government really runs. So every time you see a story like this that shows the difference between what they've said and what is actually being done, no one should be surprised, A, because at a very fundamental level, nearly everything that they say is a lie. But two, the execution is always going to be a problem for them because they literally don't know what they're doing. That will not stop them from lying about numbers, fabricating numbers, or fabricating a narrative that the press will pick up to say otherwise. But the bare truth is that it is either a lie or it is otherwise unexecutable or unreliable.
Talking to Andrea Cabral.
So, Andrea Cabral, I always want to feel hopeful about the Supreme Court, and I've been very disappointed, obviously, lately, 6-3 conservatives. But I was a little heartened that we had a 5-4 decision with the Chief Justice Roberts and Amy Coney Barrett voting with the 3 liberals when they rejected Trump's request to keep billions of dollars that was going of contracts that have gone to USAID. He wants to keep the money frozen. They said they can't keep the money frozen. We'll see if he follows the Supreme Court's directive, but maybe only Amy Coney Barrett and Roberts will shut down some of this ambitious program of Donald Trump.
Like I said, I always say to you, Marjorie.
Okay, she's laughing at me again.
Your optimism. No, I mean, I saw this a slightly different way. I mean, I think Amy Coney Barrett, she's been the one that has probably surprised people more than some of the others. I'm still not convinced that, when it comes down to cases that she won't necessarily side with the majority. But look, in order for the fact that the real story here is that there were 4 dissenting justices who basically were willing to write dissents that uphold something that their Lord and Master wants to do and fly in the face of literally centuries of fundamental contract law. Yeah. Contract law that says when people perform a service for you, you have to pay them if they are contractors. So essentially, the fact that, I mean, to me, that's a big part of the real story, is that they all were basically willing to throw all of this contract law out in order to satisfy Trump. But basically what the court did was they said, look, we're lifting the freeze, but it's got to go back down to the district court to decide which contracts need to be paid. Now, on the one hand, that gives the district court an opportunity to sort of lay out all of this stuff. But this should have been a no-brainer. This should have been, the freeze never should have happened to begin with. Now they go back down and a court will make a decision about which contracts need to be paid. And the Trump administration will object to that and try to take that back up to, meanwhile, there's an open question as to whether or not any of this is getting paid because they further didn't set any kind of a deadline. The decision is unsigned, and it doesn't give direction other than to say it's up to the district court to decide which of these contracts should be paid and which ones shouldn't. And they certainly don't close the door on hearing even a one-by-one appeal as the Trump administration objects to each one individually.
One thing I'm shocked that Marjorie has not said about this case, because this is something you drove home for weeks and weeks and weeks. The Supreme Court took this case and rendered a decision in about a minute and a half.
Well, that's true.
After the district court ruled. And as we all know, one of the reasons why the major prosecutions against Donald Trump did not happen, unlike what happened in, obviously, the New York case, is because they slow-walked everything of the Supreme Court, except the case out of Colorado that would have knocked him off the ballot. That they sped up because that was in favor of Trump. The point being, for those who call us all the time and say, well, the procedure is such that it takes a long time for cases to work their way up to the Supreme Court, the answer is it does take a long time unless they don't want it to take a long time, in which case it happens quickly. Here, amazingly to me, considering they rebuffed him, they move quickly. But the basic point to me is they can move quickly whenever they have to. We're talking.
And did you catch the video that CNN had?
No.
After Trump's speech the other night.
No.
He goes down and he shakes the hands of the Supreme Court justices.
Oh, yes.
He can be seen on video shaking Robert's hand and saying, thank you very much. And then he pats him. He gives him this sort of side pat on the arm and says, we won't forget it.
Oh, my God.
Never seen a president do anything remotely like that, but he has a lot to thank them for because they essentially made him a king. And it's disgraceful. But when people look at this decision and they say, well, Robert sided with the liberal justices, and Marjorie, I'm sorry, but maybe to your saying, you have some hope. I don't want to dampen that. But the president of the United States thanked the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court last night and told him that his decision wouldn't be forgotten. And there's a bunch of decisions you could pick from, the most important of which is obviously presidential immunity. And it is just catastrophic that something like that, in my view, not only would happen, but would be caught on camera. It tells me that he wants people to see him thanking the Supreme Court. He wants the public to know that he believes they're in his pocket, and he believes it strongly enough and is proud enough of it that he'll do this on camera.
We're talking to Andrea Cabral. Andrea, I want to talk to you about political tactics for a second, since you spent a lot of your career in politics and obviously in law enforcement. If we have time, we'll talk about what's happening with Tesla. I mean, there's a lot of things that I think neither of us support, and I'm sure you don't, vandalism and stuff of Teslas. That's not just because I own one, by the way. But this is a protest in Europe, in countries like Germany, 75% decline in rate. But I want to talk about another boycott. Here is the Reverend Jamal Bryant. He's a prominent Atlanta area megachurch pastor discussing this boycott of Target because of their position on DEI and related things. Here is Reverend Bryant.
There's never a revolution without inconvenience. It is not over in 40 days. That is a benchmark for us. This is being driven by the church. The Montgomery bus boycott was effective, not just because of its strategy, but because of its spiritual underpinning. We're asking people to divest from Target because they have turned their back on our community.
And by the way, to reinforce what he said, while he's the lead minister, he's not the only one. There are a lot of religious leaders that are saying this is the right thing to do. How do you feel about that as a tactic, Andrea Cabral? I don't think we've ever discussed this with you.
We haven't discussed it before, but I'm completely in agreement with it. And some of the most effective protests in this country's history have been protests that have been led by the church and allies of the church. And this is an economic one, much like the Montgomery bus boycott, which was successful because it actually affected the economy of the city and affected the people where people were, the places where people were working, didn't have workers anymore. I think it's very effective. And I think given the amount of revenue that the spending by communities affected by Trump's bigotry and attempted retrenchment and white supremacy, given the money that generates or would be lost in terms of what's being spent, I think it's incredibly effective. I have canceled my Amazon Prime membership, which is really tough to do. I've canceled my Amazon Prime membership. I haven't shopped at Target since they did this. I haven't shopped at Walmart since they did this. You know, I don't even shop at Whole Foods anymore because Amazon owns it. And it's what you can do. I mean, we talk about the Tesla stuff that, you know, you're not supposed to destroy property. You certainly shouldn't be looking to hurt people in terms of your protest. But what you can do is you can vote with your dollars and, you know, vote with your feet, as they say. And so I think this is great. I hope it catches on. There needs to be pushback to what the Trump administration is doing. And what these companies understand is how much money they make or don't make based on their behavior and based on their obeying in advance or acquiescence to Trump. And they need to see that message clearly.
And, you know, I had forgotten that the Montgomery bus boycott went on for more than a year. So people were walking, you know, they didn't have cars. They had depended on the buses, and they were walking for more than a year. I mean, that really showed some stick-to-itiveness, no question. What are you laughing at?
The reason I'm laughing, and I hate to be unkind to people who meant well, but relentlessness is the key to success in life, in my opinion, whether it's a boycott or whatever. Do you remember a couple of years ago, the Democrats had a sit-in on the House floor
on guns,
and which I thought was terrific because they don't do those kind of tactics. Remember what happened to the sit-in?
Well, it lasted about 12 hours.
Why?
And they had to leave for 4th of July.
Exactly. They had to leave for 4th of July. I mean, it's...
Yeah, I'm not sure the pink outfits were effective. We talked about that earlier with Chuck Todd.
Well, actually, we should get your thoughts. What do you think about the form of protest from Green, obviously engaging or attempting to engage Trump, Al Green, who was censured this morning by the House of Representatives, to the people who had little paddles with messages on them, to the handful of people who walked out. What do you think? And obviously the majority of Democrats sat there, didn't applaud things they thought were inappropriate or not applaud-worthy. What do you think of their performance the other night?
It's not enough. It's not going to be enough until you do more than issue statements on social media or write strongly worded letters. This is not a difference of opinion. This is the difference between this country continuing to function as a democracy and functioning as something far more autocratic, authoritarian, if not fascist. This requires everybody to meet the moment. And part of the reason I said what I said about Michelle Wu is because I believe Michelle Wu met the moment. She's an elected official of a city, one city in the United States of America, and she was able to meet the moment in ways that we haven't seen people elected who have 6-year terms, by the way, at least in the Senate, have been unable to plan for and successfully push back on stuff that the people who are doing this stuff, they told them for a full year what they were going to do. It's not like you didn't have time to plan and figure this out. So it's not enough. It's just not enough.
Andrea Cabral, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Talk to you next week.
Will.
See you guys next week. Bye-bye.
We've been speaking with former Suffolk County Sheriff Andrea Cabral and former Massachusetts Secretary of Public Safety. And Andrea Cabral joins us every week, and we're very grateful that she does. Okay, coming up, education with BU's Anthony Jack. We're going to talk about what the Department of Education could mean to the public schools in terms of massive amounts of money loss and DEI, etc. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Get trusted, local news in your inbox every weekday. GBH Daily is a newsletter full of everything you need to know to start your day informed on the issues that matter to you. From what's happening at the State House, across the Commonwealth, down in Washington, and around the world. You can subscribe at gbh.org/daily to get GBH Daily in your inbox each weekday. That's gbh.org/daily.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And the Skating Club of Boston, presenting the ISU World Figure Skating Championships with over 300 athletes competing at TD Garden March 25th through 30th for the title of World Champion. Tickets at isuworlds2025.com. And Bridgewater State University, helping create jobs for Massachusetts and working to connect industry leaders to graduates. elevating business in Boston and beyond. bridgew.edu/elevate.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We're streaming youtube.com/GBH News. Peter Wolf, formerly of the Geils Band, then a solo career, has written a fabulous memoir. He'll be in studio at 1 o'clock to talk about it. Tomorrow we have a packed show at the BPL. Former ambassador to Spain, Alan Solomon, is going to join us to talk about the situation in the Middle East. Former EPA commissioner nationally, Gina McCarthy, will be with us. And Marty Barron, former editor of The Globe, and more importantly, at least in terms of our topic of discussion, The Washington Post, will zoom in, and obviously we have live music. By the way, a number of people on text are complaining that the chat function of our YouTube broadcast is shut down.
Right.
That's true. It'll be back up in a couple of days, and as a favor to us, don't ask us why it's shut down, because just don't. And we apologize, and it'll be up soon. Here now via Zoom is Anthony Jack. He is the inaugural faculty director of the Newberry Center and associate professor of higher education leadership at Boston University Wheelock College of Education and Human Development. His latest book is Class Dismissed: When Colleges Ignore Inequality and Students Pay the Price. Tony, it's good to see you. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure.
Yeah, so from what I've read, Tony, closing down or almost closing down the Department of Education could really be devastating for K through 12, for kids with disabilities, for after-school programs, for student loans. I mean, what are you most concerned about here if the president does follow through and Linda McMahon, the new person running the thing, or if they do follow through on their threat to shut it down?
I'm scared, to be 100% honest with you. And in the way how you even opened the question, right? This is a life course thing, right? We're talking about everything from kids who are entering school through Head Start and starting their education all the way to college. And my question is simply this: how can you say you want more lower income students to go to college, right? To live out the American dream, come from rural backgrounds, come from lower income backgrounds, but you're cutting funding that keeps food in a kindergartner's belly. Right, you can't focus on the ABCs when you're hungry. You think you can handle trigonometry when your stomach pains are all you can think about. Federal funding in schools are the safety net for the most vulnerable in society, right? We're talking about a pipeline issue. If you cut funding to states, to places where, you have a school where 90% of the students are on free and reduced lunch, and you're saying either we're not going to cover it or you have to cover more of it, sometimes that meal is the only meal that students have. Right, we're talking about a fundamental cut to basic needs for students, and then we get to the academic stuff. Then we get to the scholastic stuff. If we don't get a handle on that, we're going to be in trouble. But to shut down the DOE is literally to take the safety net from under millions of children's feet.
Can I insert a factual thing here? I think some of our listeners through text have a false sense of security. In the executive order that Trump is about to sign, he acknowledges, while he wants to dismantle it or get rid of it, he acknowledges he needs congressional approval. Most people think he will not get it. So and even though in her opening statement to the employees at the Department of Education, McMahon invited them to join her on our momentous final mission. The fact that he probably won't get congressional approval doesn't change the fact he can gut the secretariat by essentially doing Musk-like firings, so that yes, it continues to exist, but there's no there. Is that a fair statement, Tony?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, just think about this. We had a much more competent federal Department of Education under the previous administration, and look how disruptive the FAFSA debacle was, right? The
student loan application,
federal application for student finance,
Yeah.
the student loan application, right?
Yeah.
Think about how much trouble we had working through that, and the kind of the repercussions that we are having right now, right? And that was with a more competent group of people who say, "Hey, I actually want this department to continue. I want to right this wrong." And yet you're talking about people who are saying that I don't want to clean up anything. I don't want to help. I don't want to, they cut down IES for statistics, right? They're shutting down and they're firing so many people. The DOE is one of the smallest government agencies, right? Of numbers wise. You're not saving money right? Which is all the efficiency and saving money thing. You're not saving money by cutting the Department of Education. You're fundamentally hurting millions of people.
What about people who have federal loans already? I've heard some concern from them too.
The thing about the federal loan situation is we actually don't know. We keep going back, like, can you forgive loans? Can you not forgive loans? What court is going to stop it? What court is going to allow it? Right? We actually don't know what the state of loans is. Are we going to still forgive those who have loans who are in certain fields that we actually need, like nursing and social work? We don't actually know how loans are going to go going forward. Will we actually be a country that, one, tries to combat class inequality in higher education, but actually put a tamper on how class works and who gets to go to college, because these loans that the federal government can give are typically at a lower rate than what market, and allow so many people to go. But I'm also worried about Pell Grants, right? I'm actually worried about any kind of support that previous administrations, both Democrat and Republican, have near guaranteed students who want to, again, who have that aspiration to achieve the American dream, to go to college. I'm worried about any support that the federal government now is saying, we don't want to help you do that because we don't value that as a real goal in life.
You know, the other thing that I don't understand either, and maybe you do, we've had Governor Maura Healey, the Attorney General Andrea Campbell here, Mayor Wu, all say, and people in Rhode Island have done this too, not to cancel these DEI programs in response to Trump's orders in the schools. So that's what they're saying, and yet you see a lot of colleges who are backing down on DEI stuff. So what's the difference?
I mean, some colleges are really, as the scholar put, obeying in advance, right? Yeah. Let's take a step back first. There are some colleges who are waiting for his win to start rolling back things. There are colleges that canceled scholarships for Native Americans when the Supreme Court made the decision for students for fair admissions against Harvard. And that Supreme Court case said nothing about scholarships, said nothing about what they were closing down, but they were just using it as a way to do what they want to do. Now, for the states for the colleges and universities that actually say, hey, we want to support students and we value these things, for them to go for those who preemptively shut down, right? They were obeying in advance to kind of shield themselves. Let's not forget, when Harvard defended itself in the Supreme Court case, it was revealed that they had a $17 million bill. Partly because they didn't alert their insurance company. But that $17 million is one of the biggest deterrences to stand up to this administration for many college and universities. Not many places have $17 million in surplus to defend itself in lawsuits. I think it is premature when people shut down stuff too early because this administration keeps flipping and flopping. But it's a big deterrence, especially when now you're not getting NIH funding. You're not getting the National Institute of Mental Health funding. You're not getting the supports to do research that covers the cost of, who you hire, the expenses for doing the research that lead to groundbreaking, innovations. But now the federal government is saying, we're going to remove your contract that you had already built your entire, next 5-year plan, thinking that you're going to get because you got the grant.
I'm embarrassed to say I don't know this. What is the university where you work said or done on this front? Have they?
Nothing yet. A lot of universities like BU, like others, and especially if you think about the work that's being done at Wesleyan, it's like we're going to abide by the law, right? But we are also still going to make sure that we are supporting students. And so right now, I haven't heard of necessarily any major changes that have been going on. But again, without clear direction of what is and what is not allowed, because we still have not received clear instructions of what DEI is, right? DEI is still the boogeyman, right? We're almost like in a Scooby-Doo situation where we're trying to figure out exactly who is the person behind the ghost mask. And we don't know.
First of all, I'm not going to take issue with you. I'm going to just say Wesleyan, unlike a lot of others, president of Wesleyan and president of Mount Holyoke have had the courage to do what virtually none of their colleagues in higher ed have done, actually speak out in favor. Not because from my perspective, and you're in the system, Tony Jack, I'm not, so you may disagree. We'll see. There is one group of universities, I would say Northeastern, Harvard to a degree, who engage in that phrase you were talking about from Tim Snyder a minute ago, anticipatory obedience. There are a lot of university presidents who have been silent, which in my estimation is complicity. And then there are the Mount Holyokes and the Wesleyans. And we were talking to Lee Pelton about this the other day. Now the Boston Foundation obviously was President Emerson for a while. Is this, in your I know it's hard to generalize. Is it because, like with many corporations, at least in our estimation here, they didn't believe in it to begin with, and the first opportunity to escape doing DEI, they did. We talked about Target a couple of minutes ago with Andrea Cabral. Or is it that a lot of these research institutions, Harvard being a good example, has hundreds of millions of dollars potentially at risk at the hands of a punitive Donald Trump, and they're doing what they're doing. I'm not defending it. I'm trying to explain it. Doing what they're doing because they want to protect their finances. How do you explain this odd behavior from people who you generally expect some strength from?
I don't think we disagree all that much. My thing is, I also, because in my research, right, I will always push universities that they need to meet students where they are, not where they wish they would be. And we need these kind of initiatives to actually do that. But I also think it is a fundamental problem that you can identify 5 people out of a university that employs thousands and say, this is the 5 people that if we remove, then all of our DEI now is somehow in line, is somehow legally, we're in the good, right, when it comes to law. To me, that is a fundamental failing of the fact that equity and inclusion should not be relegated to just 5 people, predominantly women, predominantly people of color, at one university, right? You should not be able to identify one office. So that is showing not necessarily their false interest in DEI, but rather just how far they were willing to push to make it a core issue. And that, to me, is where a lot of presidents say, like, I don't necessarily agree with saying that silence equals complicity. Complying with this and complicity in some kind of way, because I think there is this larger issue, right, about how do you defend the university in this context when everything is changing, right? You sent out a Dear Colleague letter at like 4:59 on a Friday before a holiday weekend that has no clear guidance, that has no clear, like, oh, these are the type of programs. Because what gets me is that they're labeling DEI as, and also with the targeting of student groups, right? The way in which they're doing it is saying as if that these are these like spaces that no one else is allowed. We're not actually understanding the work that these offices or student groups actually do.
Well, and also you mentioned a lot of these organizations, things like black student unions are being shut down all over the country. Donald Trump is not shutting them down. Universities are choosing to defund them, even though they're not being ordered to do this. And can I?
West Point shut down all these places
I know that
too. Yeah.
Tony Jack, we have talked a lot on this show about how even though mass deportation has not happened, the threat of mass deportation has had a profound effect on people who might be affected in terms of sending their kid to school, going to work, going to the doctor, going to the church, etc. Kids who you work with, when this is hanging over, even if the ultimate whatever thing has not come down on them, the anticipation of this and what it could mean for their lives, for their institutions, what are you hearing from kids who you work with?
I mean, students are scared. Students don't know if they can still do the planning when a student comes to college, and a lot of first-gen students, a lot of students of color, a lot of students from different groups, sometimes the bright spot in that semester is that cultural event that they are able to put on, right? And they are scared that one bright spot, because it's a slog, right? Right now, we are just getting to spring break and students are tired. Students are fearful. They are extra tired because of everything that's going on. And now they don't know what the next day could be for them. They don't know if the people who are on campus, who they feel most comfortable talking to, who they go to for support, who understand where they come from, will actually be there when they come back from break, right? I think about the students who come from more rural backgrounds and the schools that have programs to support students from rural backgrounds and from lower income backgrounds, and the kind of that's actually needed to understand, what does it mean to come from the hollows of West Virginia? What does it mean to come from Indiana or certain parts of Texas and come to a school, in the Northeast, right? We need to actually understand what students are. And there are people who are legitimately afraid that those people who they have the most contact with will not be there, and they will feel lost at their university.
What do you say to them when they voice those concerns to you? How do you respond to that kid who you're just describing who has those fears? What do you say to him?
I don't pretend that I have any answers. Let me take it back. I don't pretend I have the answer. I tell them that it is my job, especially as director of the Newberry Center, to push the university to make sure that it's not just those 5 people who understand where they come from. It is my job to make sure that when I visit colleges across the country, is to try to work with college presidents to make sure that these things are not kind of like held up into one place, and as soon as you remove one person, you lose all the institutional history. And I tell them that I'm scared too, that I don't know how much I will be able to do my work to support first generation college students, because the landscape keeps changing, but that I will be there every day to continue the work for as long as I'm able to do so. And we have real conversations.
We're talking to Anthony Jack.
The other thing is the fighting. We don't know how things are going to end up between Israel and Hamas. Trump has threatened federal funding for schools that allow what he calls illegal protests, deport student, quote unquote, aliens, as he calls them, who joined, quote unquote, pro-jihadist demonstrations. He said things on True Social, like agitators will be imprisoned and are permanently sent back to the country from which they came. I don't know if he can do this, but again,
talk about a chilling effect.
Yeah, and we have a right to protest and a right to assemble, to complain about things in the United States of America, even if it is a pro-Palestinian, or at least the people in Gaza protest. So what do you make of this?
Like you said, it's a chilling effect. But my thing is, when I read that, I didn't just think about what's going on in the Middle East. I thought back to George Floyd. I thought back to Howard Gardner. I thought back to Trayvon Martin. I thought back to any time that people voiced discontent with the status quo, and especially as it pertains to race, gender, or sexuality. I thought about the women who have marched in Women's Day parades and marches. I think about anyone who is against that agenda. It is, again, DEI is a scapegoat. Instead of saying Black, they're using DEI. Instead of saying women, they're saying DEI and a whole host of things. Because let's not forget, West Point also canceled Women's History Month, Black History Month things. Jewish holidays are not being celebrated in the same way, right? This is like there is no limit, right? There's no bounded nature to these talks, which is why he's speaking out more on True Social and Twitter than he is through legislation, because legislation, you at least have to be more precise than you can be on social media.
Well, also, if people change their behavior just by threats, you don't even have to worry about going through legislative process. You sign an executive order and wait till it trickles down to cause people to do behaviors that.
But again, we have women politicians here in Massachusetts who are saying they won't do it. They're not going to crack down on DEI programs in schools here. So there are people too.
Well, and urging people not to do what a lot of institutions are doing. Tony, you've only been with us twice, and I asked you this last time, but for those who didn't hear you, we've mentioned where you work. Could you explain what the work of the Newberry Center is one more time for people who are new to it, please?
Yeah, so the Newberry Center is to support first generation undergraduate, graduate, and professional students as they make their way through Boston University. The whole point of the center is to recognize that so many of our students, almost 1 in 5, are the first in their families to go to college or pursue a graduate degree. And that is a significant accomplishment because we are really allowing people to live out that dream of getting a college degree. But that also means meeting students again where they are. And one thing that we try to be at the Newberry Center is we try to be as flexible as our students' lives are unpredictable. Because when you come from a lower income background or you come from a first generation college background, you don't have the same kind of experiences as many of your peers who know what office hours are, who can travel, travel during spring break when your university usually shuts down, right? There are a lot of things that are new to you that are old for some, and it is our job, right? And my joy to be able to demystify this hidden curriculum, right? To be able to share with students, how do you navigate these institutions so that you can truly use it as a launch pad to the career and the life that you want upon graduation.
Do most or do a decent number of your fellow colleges and universities have similar programs for first generation kids or no?
They are growing, right? So Dartmouth and Georgetown have programs. They are growing, but to have a actual office, that is rare. Right. There are particular programs that are done for first-gen students. I mean, there's even Berea College, which is specifically geared towards lower income and first-generation college students from rural environments. But it's not something that it's not something as frequent as, other offices that we see on campus. But it is a growing thing because more and more schools are targeting the recruitment of students who are first in their families to go to college.
You mentioned, just one last thing, you mentioned a couple of the things that first-generation kids encounter or aren't ready for. Is there one that stands out amongst all the rest that's the number one issue or number one problem that you and they confront?
That's a great question. I always talk about office hours because I feel that it's kind of like a great metaphor to talk about just how much of our life is class, right? Office hours are a time that faculty set aside for students. But if you don't know that and the professor comes into class and say, hey, my office hours are Tuesday and Thursday from 3 to 4, you might say that's that professor's time to do work, right? The language in the academy is loaded and coded, right? When you hear the word fellowship, right, you may think about going to Oxford as a Rhodes Scholar. There are many people who think about the word fellowship and going to church on Sunday, right? And so when I talk about office hours and language, I want to make sure that when we invite students to campus, that they are not in they don't feel separated from all the things like going abroad, going to using the library for all its resources, accessing mental health services, getting internships through career services. I don't want something as simple as language and our assumptions that students know what we're talking about when we use shorthand to be the reason why a student doesn't go to Google for a summer or a student doesn't go to the MFA for winter break because they have a 4-week internship that they have.
Tony, we got to go, but I would like you, I think I speak for Marta too, to entertain a thought of maybe coming in with a couple of the kids with whom you work
that'd be great.
For a whole segment, talking about those issues and hearing from the people who are first-generation students and the person who's trying to work with them, you. That'd really be great if you're willing, so let us know.
Yeah, I would love that because the experiences of first-generation college students is not monolithic. There is no one single experience.
Great. Tony Jack, it's good to see you again. Thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Good to see y'all.
Yep.
We have been speaking with Tony Jack, the inaugural faculty director of the Newberry Center and associate professor of higher ed leadership at BU's Wheelock College of Education and Human Development. His latest book is Class Dismissed: When Colleges Ignore Inequality and Students Pay the Price. Thanks again to Tony. After a quick break, just enough time for our two more things segment, and right after the 1 o'clock news, you're going to be joined by Peter Wolf. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Mickey Barnes is unexpendable. His job is to explore space, endure violent deaths, and be reprinted to die again.
You're Mickey 16? 17. Jerk.
And the inspiration for the aliens Mickey meets? Croissants. I'm Ari Shapiro. Director Bong Joon-ho on his wild new movie, Mickey 17, on the next All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you.
And Turkish Airlines, flying to over 300 destinations worldwide, including Athens, Seoul, Mumbai, and more. A complete list of destinations and more information is available at turkishairlines.com. And MIT Sloan Executive Education, helping professionals empower their careers and explore over 90 courses blending cutting-edge research with real-world application. More at executive.mit.edu.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio, Jim Bush, GBH News. It's time for two more things. If you haven't been tuning in at 12:50, is it 12? Yeah, 12:55 every day. That's where we each address a story that didn't fit into the rest of the show. What's yours?
Well, mine is this really neat thing that a group of artists did on the old State House on Tuesday night. They projected these messages on there. So you got the brick buildings of the brick of the old State House and these big letters. And they had three different messages. One is Boston doesn't back down. This was in reference to Mayor Wu's statement before her appearance in Congress. So they did that big one. And then they did, in response to Tom Homan saying he can bring hell to Boston, they put up one that says, "You can't bring hell to Boston. It's been waiting for you since 1770. And then they had a third one. We have a good track record with tyrants here. Of course, that was in reference to, of course, King George, and they were going back to the Revolution. And, you know, the State House was chosen by this group, and they're called Silence Do Good, which was the pseudonym for Ben Franklin back in Revolutionary times. They chose the State House because of the Boston Massacre, association with that. And Wednesday, I didn't know this, Jim, is the 255th anniversary of the massacre. So that was yesterday, actually. And then they also quoted Sam Adams of Boston, who wrote in 1780 that, quote, "If ever vain and aspiring men," unquote, "take power," in the U.S., sorry, that was my phone going off there. Let me shut off my phone.
You want to take a couple of calls?
No,
and
I
then
don't.
Continue, or no? Okay.
Our country will stand in need of its experienced patriots to prevent its ruin. And those most experienced patrons are Bostonians. To all who call Boston home, you belong here. To all who question our eternal enmity to tyranny, or read a history book. So anyway, this group is really great. They did this at the old State House. They're called Silence Do Good. And Diane Dwyer is the member of the group that the Globe talked to.
You can take some calls now while I do my one more thing, okay?
Okay, all right.
So here in the show, you know, we've been pretty critical of the legislature, not doing enough, not being transparent enough, taking a 5-month vacation every 2 years, and a lot more. Well, recently they agreed to make minor reforms so that a little, and I emphasize a little, more sun would shine in. Yesterday, in a great Boston Globe editorial, they described that sunshine thing as a minor fix, which it is. It's very minor, and said that they were ignoring far more serious concerns. And those were, Marjorie, big bonuses for legislators who chair committees. Now, listen to this carefully, please, which never meet and never consider legislation.
Never meet.
Emma Platoff and Laura Grimaldi wrote this great follow-up story in the Globe, filling in the blanks. Listen to this. 12 of the 53 legislative committees on Beacon Hill didn't hold one hearing or consider one bill last year, yet their chairs received a $22,000 to $45,000 bonus to do nothing. One senator, Mark Montigny, hit the jackpot. He chairs 2 committees that didn't consider a single bill. His reward, $61,000 additional dollars. Then there's Will Brownsberger. He chairs the Census Committee, Marjorie, which did nothing last year, not to mention that there's not another census for 5 more years. There are many more, or should I say much less. If you're okay with this...
What's the theory, though? Why do they do this?
Why? So that the Speaker and the Senate President have total control.
Yeah.
You want $30,000? Shut up. In any case, if you're okay with this, that means you're related to a committee chair. If you're not okay, maybe you should call
Join GBH at our Brighton studios for Stories from the Stage. You'll hear entertaining, inspirational stories while you enjoy drinks with friends. Join our studio audience at one of our upcoming shows. Tickets and more info at gbh.org/events.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And GM Roth Design Remodeling. Dreams delivered. With custom kitchens, bathrooms, and additions. Serving New England for over 39 years. Learn more at gmroth.com. And Boston Ballet, presenting Swan Lake. This timeless love story features thrilling dancing, masterful music, and breathtaking sets. On stage now through March 16th. Official tickets at bostonballet.org.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. President Trump's announced on social media that the U.S. plans to exempt more imported goods from Mexico until April 2nd. Earlier this week, he launched 25% tariffs on Mexican and Canadian imports. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick on CNBC.
Hopefully, Mexico and Canada will have done a good enough job on fentanyl that this part of the conversation will be off the table and we'll move just to the reciprocal tariff conversation.
President Trump set April 2nd as the date to begin reciprocal tariffs on goods from a wider range of countries. Billionaire Elon Musk continues to oversee President Trump's efforts to overhaul the federal government with his Doge entity. He has stated an ambitious goal to cut $1 trillion in federal spending by the end of this fiscal year in September. But as NPR Stephen Fowler tells us, any major changes of that magnitude are supposed to be driven by Congress, not Doge.
For every dollar the federal government has spent so far since the start of this fiscal year in October 2024, Doge has claimed to save the equivalent of about 4 pennies. An NPR review finds those savings claims from actions like pushing agencies to fire workers and cut contracts are drastically inflated. But even if you take those numbers at face value, Doge's focus is on such a small part of the multi-trillion-dollar federal budget handled by Congress. About 2/3 of this year's federal spending has been on Social Security, Medicare, health programs, income security, and veterans benefits and services. Most of what's left goes towards interest on the debt and defense. Stephen Fowler, NPR News, Atlanta.
The European Union's holding emergency talks in Brussels about increasing its defenses, including in support of Ukraine against Russian military forces, in the event President Trump disengages with the U.S.'s longtime allies. About a week after he visited the White House, French President Emmanuel Macron said he plans to speak with other European leaders about the possibility of using France's nuclear deterrent to protect the continent from Russian aggression. President Trump says he has issued the Palestinian militant group Hamas its, quote, last warning to release hostages held in Gaza. NPR's Hadil Al-Shalchi has more.
President Donald Trump threatened Hamas this week, saying if they don't release all the hostages, both dead and alive, it's, quote, over for the group. In a social media post, Trump also said he was, quote, sending Israel everything it needs to, quote, finish the job. This comes after the White House said U.S. officials have had direct talks with Hamas on the hostage deal. Hamas rebuffed Trump's threats, saying that it will only free the Israeli hostages if all sides reached a deal that would see a permanent end to the war in Gaza. The group said that it wanted to enter the second phase of the ceasefire, which would also see a complete withdrawal of Israeli troops from Gaza. Hadil Al-Shalchi, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
From Washington, this is NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry
A new
Santoro.
report says
a Westport, Connecticut resident is being recognized for his contributions to the state's arts and music scene. As Connecticut Public Radio's Eddie Martinez reports, he just so happens to be a member of one of the most acclaimed rock bands in history.
The Rolling Stones' hit songs blared from the speakers as the crowd vied for a view of legendary guitarist Keith Richards. Richards accepted the honor after a slightly awkward wait as the award made its way to the podium at the Westport Library. Governor Ned Lamont broke the tension the best way he knew how.
So what do you think of the Beatles? The library is amazing.
Richards has lived in Connecticut for 40 years and says it's been a great place to raise his family. He says he's honored to be the first recipient of the Connecticut Governor's Award of Excellence.
Thank you, Connecticut. You kind of get lost for words with something like this around your neck.
Richards is being honored for his support of various local organizations and as an advocate for arts, education, and people with disabilities. For the New England News Collaborative, I'm Eddie Martinez.
Cloudy, windy, upper 50s today, and from one rock star, Keith Richards, to another, Peter Wolf. Here we go. Don't touch that dial. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Fisher Investments. As a fiduciary, Fisher Investments is obligated to act in their client's best interest. Learn more at FisherInvestments.com. Investing in securities involves the risk of loss. This is NPR.
Never thought about tomorrow. Seemed like a long time to come.
Welcome to hour number 3 of Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Going to be back at the Boston Public Library tomorrow. Hello again, Jim.
Hello again, Marjorie. You're hearing some music from our next guest, who's here in Studio 3. Singular singer-songwriter Peter Wolf. His career began in the 60s with that legendary band, the Three Imps, before he moved on to his next band, the Hallucinations. And then, of course, he became the lead singer for some other band, the Geils Band, before heading out with a wildly successful solo career. He's out with a new fabulous memoir, a collection of stories spanning decades, all about deep relationships and fleeting run-ins with some names you might recognize. Here's just a handful of these people: David Lynch, Faye Dunaway, Robert Lowell, Muddy Waters, Paul Newman, O.J. Simpson, Alfred Hitchcock, Mick Jagger, John Lennon, Julia Child, Merle Haggard, Aretha Franklin, Martin Scorsese, Pele, Andy Warhol, Norman Rockwell, Van Morrison, Bob Dylan. I could go on, but you should just go buy the book. The book is Waiting on the Moon, Artists, Poets, Drifters, Grifters, and Goddesses. Comes out Tuesday, and there's a book launch at the First Parish Church in Harvard Square. That's 7 o'clock on Tuesday. And to get tickets, go to harvard.com/events. And if you miss that, he's also got stops in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, New York City, Philadelphia, Ridgewood, New Jersey. PeterWolf.com for info and tickets. Peter, congratulations. It's great to see you. How are you?
Thank you, Jim. I'm so honored to be here with you and Marjorie. You should be on the road with me. You could, the way you did that.
I think we passed about 15 minutes, my friend.
No, that was like Wolfa Goofa Mama Tufa making your knees freeze you up, bladder splatter. Everything you's got to come out the way you did it. It was perfect. I was waiting for a little blurb, but it didn't happen.
I feel very proud. Thank you, Peter.
Well, thank you.
Well, so as Jim just said, every page was another 5 famous people that you sat down and broken bread with. And you talked about how many people told you should write a book. So what made you finally do it?
Well, here's, I've planned this for about maybe 20 years because I would tell stories and people say, oh, that's great, you should put it in a book. And so one day I put together in a loose leaf just different stories of people. And this is not a book about, I met this famous person, I met that famous person. These are people by serendipity I happen to meet. And these are people I idolized. So each chapter, I did not make it there's so many musicians' memoirs out, and I've read a lot of them, and they get kind of tedious. I wanted to try a different approach. So I made each chapter like a short story.
Yeah.
And the people that I met, many of them I idolized, and I still, to this day, can't believe that I've, have a relationship or knew of these people or had encounters with these people. And so I started to make a list, and slowly it came together. And there was a woman who's a great painter. Her name is Grace O'Connor, and that's who the book is dedicated to, her and her sister. And she, after COVID, she said, we were telling these stories last night. You got to write them down. She's a big reader, and we would share books and things. And so I started writing, and I'd send it to her. She would look at it and say, what about the part with so-and-so, or this is a little too much. And so that's really how it all came about.
Well, you have an unbelievable memory, too. Not only do you talk about all these people, but you talk about the green couch was there, the orange couch was there, what was on the coffee table. You got a great memory for what was in the room or those details, which, that's incredible.
Well, I was kind of shocked myself. I say in the prologue that there are certain things, memories can do tricks, but I really couldn't believe like the dialogue I could recall.
Yeah.
And it's not word for word, obviously, but the emotion of what's being said, I do remember.
We should say, Peter just said he writes about meaningful people he's met along the way. We are not in the book. I should say that is.
Oh God! Well, Jim, we're talking about John Lennon and Yoko and Bruce Springsteen. For God's sake, Simon and Garfunkel.
You're being unfair because you both were in the book, but I have these editors at Little Brown. And they just...
Peter Wolf, it's so hard to pick a story or two. We're going to pick a few that really stayed with us. So you're at this place called Izzy's. You'll tell us about Izzy's in a minute. Right. And somebody's playing in the back room. What was Izzy's and who was playing in the back room?
Well, when I was young, I used to just leave my small little 3-room apartment up in the Bronx. You can get on the sub, the train station, and just go down to the Village or 42nd Street. And I used to walk around 42nd Street, but the Village always intrigued me. And I was always into music. I always bought records. And so one day there was this place in Greenwich Village, which was the epicenter of the folk scene, as in Boston, where the Club 47, Joan Baez, Eric Von Schmidt, and those people up here. But
our friend Tom Rush, too, I should say. Yes,
Tom Rush, and the Jim Kweskin, the list can go on. But New York, really was the sort of, because of the record companies, etc. And there was this place where all the musicians hung out called the Folklore Center. And I'd go in there to buy, obscure records, all the folkway records. And I'm going through the record bin one day, and there's this curtain in the back room in this long sort of shoebox store. And I hear this guy, well, pretty pig you, pretty pig you, oh, I got myself there. And it was just totally intriguing. And he was going, he was there obviously with a couple other players, and they were talking, oh yeah, man, let me do this. I was after and he was talking about, when he was in the circus here and so, and it was just all intriguing. I'm just listening. And they finish their songs, they walk out with their guitars, and I walk up to the guy who was working in the store. I said, who is that guy? It was pretty amazing. I said, oh, that's one of Izzy's, who ran the store, Izzy Young. That's one of his guy just came into New York, I think this week or maybe last week, and he's been hanging out here night and day, driving me crazy. Turned out to be Bob Dylan. And so I was obsessed with wanting to hear more because, like when I first heard Elvis, I was sitting on the stoop of my apartment house in the Bronx, and I heard from a window, "Who don't leave me be?" And there's a song about a hotel, and I ran to the record store. I said, there's a song about the hotel, and the owner of the record store said, you're about the 40th kid that came in.
Oh, wow.
But the interesting thing is, I hadn't seen Elvis. I didn't know what he looked like, but there was something mystical in the voice that just got to me. And the same thing happened with Bob. Didn't know what he looked like, didn't know how old he was, didn't know anything about him. But that voice, once I heard the voice, I became really transfixed by it. So there's a kind of mystical thing with certain voices.
I'm not laughing at you. I'm saying read the book because there are a lot of encounters with Bob Dylan. Peter Wolf was walking around, I think, Manhattan, and he encounters Bob Dylan sitting by himself at a table outside some joint. And he says, do you believe Peter Wolf says this? He goes up to Bob Dylan and says, Bob, what is truth, and read in the book what Bob Dylan has to say to Peter Wolf. It's pretty great.
You have to do a little bit of the backstory in that. I used to hang out at a place called the White Horse Tavern, and that was a place that was known for Dylan Thomas's headquarters when he was in New York, and he would drink, and so a lot of writers and a lot of poets would hang out there. And I had this thing, which I didn't have much money. So I would go in, and in New York, you could, at that time, drink at the age of 18.
Yeah.
And I was like, younger and stuff. And so I would drink 2 rum 51 rums. It means I had 151 proof. I mean, most bourbons are like 80 proof. This was 151 proof, and I just empty stomach slug them down. And so my head's reeling, and I'm feeling no pain, and I'm walking down 7th Avenue, and there he is, sitting about a block away with his foot going a mile a minute, wearing a sort of, Zorro-type Spanish hat. It's Bob. I got to talk to him. This is my opportunity. He's sitting all alone. And it's all described in the book.
It's beautifully described. We're talking to Peter Wolf. The book is Waiting on the Moon. It is out next Tuesday.
But you talk about, too, a time where there was a lot of, I suppose there's always been a lot of drinking in the music business, but it was like the cocaine time was coming. You go to these parties or just to people's houses, and there'd be cocaine all over the place. And it was just kind of part of the deal, right?
It was part of the culture. I fortunately never really took to any of the drugs, any cocaine or even, marijuana and stuff. It just, I was drinking would be fine, but it just never, like I can't drink coffee. I'm too wired to do it. So, but I observed at a time where it was, everyone would, like if we were doing this show back then, we'd go off, meet in the bathroom, everybody would do a toot and come back in, and there was, there'd be something on the table, and if you had a party, you had to have, some grass, some cocaine, and whatever. So I remember being at parties in L.A. where Timothy Leary was, always there with his wife, and everybody was whacked out. Whacked out.
Is there somebody that, you think of all the people you met? I mean, we went through Alfred Hitchcock. That time you were out for lunch, I guess, with Faye Dunaway's manager, whatever she was. It seemed like every famous actor, Dustin Hoffman. I mean, they were all in that restaurant where you were. You sort of ran into all these people.
Well, that was at a private party, and we were.
Oh, I thought it was a restaurant. Sorry.
And no, there were scenes in a restaurant in the book, but we're at this private party, and there's, Dennis Hopper, and there's all sorts of actors, and Robert Redford, and this one, and I'm Chris Christopherson's in the corner playing guitars, so I sit with him, and it was late, and Faye, who I was married to at the time, was doing a movie, Towering Inferno, and it was about 2:00 in the morning. She had to be up at 5:00, so rather than driving all the way where we were staying, we ended up going to the studio 20th Century lot and decided to sleep in her dressing room. So she falls right to sleep. And I'm writing, I can't sleep, I'm an insomniac. So I write, 25 postcards to friends in Boston, to guys in the Geils Band. Hey, man, out in L.A., blah, 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 blah. And I see a mailbox outside the window, and I go and put the postcards in the mailbox. And I'm half falling asleep, and I'm woken up by, in comes, walking past me, Paul Newman, followed by Steve McQueen, followed by O.J. Simpson, because they're all in the film, and they're all talking to Faye. Hey, doll, how you doing? You should have been with us last night. We're partying, we're having this great thing. And as Paul Newman walks by me as they're leaving to get ready for the scene, he hands me a beer that he was drinking. He says, hey, kid, seems like you need this. And so I certainly didn't need the beer. All I needed was sleep. And I'm looking out the window, and I notice that the mailbox that I mailed all my postcards were being lifted into a truck, and the entire street that I thought was an actual street
prop, right?
was a movie set.
A movie set.
And they were moving the whole thing. And wait a second, wait.
Yeah.
So that's L.A. was a bit like that.
Were you hesitant at all to talk about? Marge and I said the same thing to each other. Is he going to talk about Faye Dunaway in this book?
Who was a big star already when you met, right? She'd already done Bonnie and Clyde. She was a big, huge star.
Well, we met. It's described in the book how we met, And she and I were, married for 5-6 years, and we had a really incredible marriage. We both supported each other's, careers. The careers came first, and she was incredibly generous, to me, and she would come out on the road when she could. I'd fly out to her movie sets when we could, and we had a deliriously, great time meeting people, traveling and just nonstop.
Yeah.
It went too fast.
Some of the things, speaking of too fast, these little moments, which you don't have time to talk about. Muddy Waters is playing in town. He ends up at Peter's crummy little apartment in Cambridge, right?
Yes, sir.
Listening, and you're spinning records for him because you had some experience. Can you spend a minute on I don't know if people know, you were a BCN guy. What was it, midnight to 5 a.m. kind of thing?
Midnight to 5 a.m. was the Wolf-A-Goof at midnight, jamboree, whatever you wanted to call it. And I would play, all these great blues records. And what happened is at that time, Boston closed down at around midnight. The TV turned to snow and people would turn on the radio. And many of the radio stations, other than some college radio stations, stopped broadcasting. So when I was on BCN, I was there the first day it started as a rock station, because previous it was a great classical station. And so a lot of people would listen. And it was sort of like the only game in town. And people like Muddy Waters, I interviewed Muddy Waters, I interviewed Roland Kirk, I interviewed Carla Thomas, I interviewed, so many of the great artists that came through, and Jimmy Page and Rod Stewart and, of course, Van. But there was never any tape. The radio station never could afford tape, so none of these interviews were recorded. But
it's a crime.
But it was at a time when so many people were, traveling through Boston, and I got a chance to sort of connect.
Peter Wolf, since you just mentioned Rod Stewart, one of the things that stood out with the book, and by the way, these are some of the best stories you will ever read
the
about
Alfred Hitchcock
people
story.
that matter a lot
Robert
to you in your
Lowell.
life, from Lennon to Van Morrison you just mentioned. You're a far kinder person than I thought you'd be. I hope you don't take that the wrong way. The only person you even indirectly said an unkind thing about in the whole damn book was Rod Stewart. Are you that nice, or you just decided to be nice in terms of how you're describing people?
You're not going to ask me for a loan, are you?
I'm serious. You were pretty kind to...
Well, no, I even tried to tone down Rod, because I was just Rod.
He's a big a-hole. Is that the bottom line?
No. He everyone was just so friendly. I knew Ronnie Wood at the time, and was Jeff Beck, and Rod just was starting to get involved in his own solo career with the band, and wanting to be. It was the Faces, then it became Rod Stewart and the Faces. I was just surprised that after he spent so much time in my apartment, like Muddy did, and I would take him to buy Sam Cooke records down at the Combat Zone at Big John's Oldies, record shop. I just thought, he just went, "Hey, Rod, how you doing?" He just kind of walked by. So I remember that I did not want to, sort of write anything negative. And I did not want to make a kiss and tell book, even with my marriage with Faye. As a matter of fact, as I wrote the book, the two things I decided I wasn't going to write about was my marriage and the Geils Band.
So what happened?
Well, I thought of the book as just a collection. Each chapter would be a short story about, like Hitchcock or Lowell or whatever. And then the editors said, you're missing, these people are going to want to hear something. And so I started, and Grace O'Connor, who helped me, she was sort of my muse. I would tell a story. Say, "Oh, you got to tell that story. It's such a great story. There's a book out on Chinatown that's, doesn't even, bring you into it. You bring Chinatown to life. You got to tell it. So I finally included it, and I had to add about the Geils Band because so many people wanted to know what happened. So from my point of view, like many people have seen January 6th. I know what happened. You know what happened. And some other people feel, other things happen. So this is, my view of what happened. And so that's in the chapter called Fratricide.
Okay, the book is Waiting on the Moon. Artists, poets, drifters, grifters, and goddesses. It comes out on Tuesday. A book launch at First Parish Church.
Yeah, come on down to the First Parish.
I may as well tell you now. It's going to be Tuesday, March 11th, 7 o'clock, and you want to get tickets at www.
And I have to add.
Well, we got to give the website, harvard.com/events. Go ahead.
I have to add, hosting the event, I am so honored because he's such an esteemed writer, is Peter Guralnick.
Oh, great.
And Peter, who's written some of my favorite books, and almost, from Bob Dylan to almost every musician I met, he's considered, the tip of the top. And his biographies on Elvis cannot be beat. If anyone's interested in Elvis, Peter's books on Elvis. He's got a great book on Sam Cooke, Sam Phillips, and he's writing one which is going to be a really interesting book on Colonel Tom Parker, the real story.
Elvis's guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that movie. I don't know if the movie was true. Tom Hanks played in the movie.
No. As a matter of fact,
that made him look nasty.
That's Peter's book is going to be a revelation.
Okay.
So he'll be there, and he's one of the. He knows if there's anything about Muddy, Merle Haggard, or anything like that. This man knows it all. Written the greatest books on our music of our country.
7 o'clock on Tuesday at First Parish Church.
So, Peter Wolf, we have to do the dreaded local angle here. Jim talked about your childhood, you were at the imps and hallucinations down the Cape and stuff like that, and you went to the School of the Museum of the Arts here in Boston with David Lynch, the late, great David Lynch, is your roommate. You write about he got cockroach pieces stuck in his teeth.
Well,
I don't even...
David...
It's a great detail.
I was sleeping on the Charles River, and I needed a place because, I couldn't live on the Charles River. And I'm in the hallway at the Boston Museum School, and, they had, we got a, toaster for sale, looking for a roommate, and I'm looking at the wall, there's all these paste-ups, and this voice behind me says, I'm looking for a roommate. And I go, I'm looking for a place to stay. And he goes, hi, I go, I'm Pete. And he goes, I'm David. And it was David Lynch. And he lived on Hemingway Street, and I followed him to his place. He had a small little apartment with a bunk bed. I was on the top, he was on the bottom. And David was very formal. He always wore a shirt and tie and, kind of, came from a very reserved, proper, dated, gals with, the cashmere sweaters, very...
Sort of like you.
We were the odd couple, let me tell you. I was the mess smoking 3 packs of Gauloise and playing Thelonious Monk, and David was into the Beach Boys and things like that. And so one night, I'm kind of up in the bunk bed, and I hear this curdling scream. And, David, are you all right? And he goes, oh, my God, I can't believe it. And he was brushing his teeth, and he looked at the toothbrush, and there was a half cockroach on the toothbrush. So maybe somewhere that incident may have filtered into Twin Peaks.
By the way, part of the story you have to read, he ended up locking Peter out of the apartment, which is a whole story for another time. Can you do a Julia Child imitation?
Okay.
Who? No, I couldn't do a Julia Child. I tried it. I did an audio book. But she was very nice. And the story with Julia Child is all the chefs, the key chefs in Boston were invited. Robert Mondavi was presenting a new wine. And so all the chefs were there, and they're all excited having dinner at Julia Child's house. And the person that brought me had this fishmonger store in Cambridge. And Julia started serving coleslaw and soup. And the lady that brought me whispered in my ear, she brought all that stuff at my store this morning. And all the chefs are going, oh, my God, this is the greatest, Julia. How did you make this chowder? And so it was quite an experience meeting her.
So I was going to ask you though. Okay, and you're at art school with David Lynch, and then you're doing the disc jockeying at BCN. But how did this happen for you? How did you go from the hallucinations to, you're a big star? How did it happen?
Well, what happened was the hallucinations was made up of all painters. And the fellow that I thought was the head of the group, his name is Paul Shapiro, he wanted to go off and paint, and he thought Santa Fe might give him inspiration. And I said, well, what about the band? I mean, we're opening up for the Velvet Underground, the Shirelles, the Byrds, a lot of different groups of that era. And he said, well, we'll work on weekends or something. And that just didn't sit well with me. So I ran into these 3 players in a coffee shop on Charles Street, and it was Jay, Dick, and DK on bass. And I said, hey, man, I'd love to jam with you guys. And they were fans of the band. They came to see us at the Club 47, the Hallucinations. So we got together, and I brought in the drummer from the Hallucinations, and that formed the Geils Band. Yeah, that was it. And I started, I got us a gig at the Boston Tea Party, and just kept going.
Yeah, speaking of, you were the business guy for a long time, and I was amazed, considering how many albums you had, and I would say virtually every one of which I own. You weren't making money for a huge period of time, even when the band was a huge, famous band, right?
We didn't make money until we changed labels. We were on Atlantic Records until our album Love Stinks came out. And I say make money, we were just not in the red. So people didn't have to worry about those guys who might have had apartments, rents to pay, maybe a mortgage, all of that. It wasn't until very, very late in the career when the band actually started being able to save money and not have to worry.
So was there a point at which you're saying to yourself, I'm a pretty accomplished artist. Maybe this is not the right thing for me. Maybe I should go back to painting rather than the art that I'm currently doing, singing?
No, because I was so involved and I was so obsessed with music, it just became part of my career. And so it's just, how do you keep it going?
Can I ask you one last thing? And by the way, the book is, we're talking to Peter Wolf, obviously, Waiting on the Moon, Artist Poets, Grifters, and Goddesses. I read this part of the book when I was falling asleep, so if I get it slightly wrong, you'll correct me. You weren't performing live for a while. I remember I went to see Bruce Springsteen, as I have a million times, and a bunch of years ago, and who comes out on the stage near the end to go wild? And of course, it's you, and it totally changes an extraordinary show into an otherworldly extraordinary show. But you tell a story, but you weren't performing for a while until you did join Springsteen. What time? What happened during that? What was going on?
Well, after the breakup with the band, and I loved the Geils Band, and after I had to sort of go my solo way, I put out a couple of albums. But the idea of touring, it was just so hard for me. And what do? Do I just do Geils songs and become like a Geils tribute band or something? And so I kept doing these solo records, building up material. And I knew Bruce from 1971. He came to see the Geils Band perform in New Jersey. And so I was backstage and, hey, Pete, how you doing? And I said, great, Bruce, looking forward to the show tonight. He goes, yeah, well, I'm calling you up.
Wait, you didn't know you were going to perform?
No.
Or you were just backstage planning to watch? Okay.
I said, Bruce, I haven't performed in 10 years. He looked at me totally stunned and he said, Pete, I'm calling you up tonight, so you better be ready.
Wow.
And I was so frightened. I had to call up a friend and have him come to the Boston Garden with a handful of Valium. I mean, I just did not think I was going to be able to do it. And I think it was midnight hour. They started. Dun, dun, dun. We got a guest in the house, man. Boston's own. Come on, bring him up. Let's have a Peter.
Wow.
And from that moment on, it was like a veil that was lifted. And just, Bruce took one side of the stage, I took the other side of the stage. And it was just like a love affair. It was like a great, encounter that from that moment on, I said, I got to get back on the stage.
Okay, so Peter Wolf, do you know what tomorrow is?
Tomorrow,
We're getting a lot
I do. Do you know what tomorrow is?
I don't want to know the details.
Okay, let me tell you something.
I don't want to know the details because,
bet
honestly, Jim, I really don't know the exact number. Not that I have any.
Okay, I don't care about the number,
Oh,
Peter Wolf.
wow.
Let me just say, Peter Wolf has probably not had a donut in about 25 years.
No.
Our staff bought a dozen. We ate some of them, so my apologies. A dozen donuts.
Hold on.
I lit most of the happy.
Does anybody have a camera?
I
gotta
couldn't
get a picture
squeeze
of
the
this.
You wanna get a
birthday.
picture?
Could somebody come in and take a picture?
Oh, okay.
With Peter blowing out the candles and the Dunkin' Donuts. By the way, happy birthday
Well,
tomorrow.
Happy
Thank you
birthday.
very much.
Lots of our listeners are wishing you happy birthday
Don't blow
too,
them out
Peter.
until we get a camera in
Yeah,
here.
we don't
Can
get a
somebody
camera.
come in here and take a picture
And
of
we
this,
have
please?
a special present for you. This is known as the Jim Browdy Smug Mug.
Aha.
Why do you think it's called the Smug Mug, Peter Wolf?
Look at him.
Look at the picture.
Look at him.
Oh, man.
A little smug, I know.
But we
Yeah.
miss you on TV, buddy.
Yeah.
We
You're a
certainly
nice
do.
soul.
He was very good on TV.
Okay,
wasn't
And
he?
where's your mug?
I'm
She's
on
the other side. Turn
Oh,
around.
sorry.
Yeah, I have
Look
a
at that
little-
woman.
I was a little younger than
Oh.
Peter. You know what I mean?
I don't want to say Beauty and the Beast, but we
Too late, my friend. Okay, make a wish.
Okay.
First of all, make a wish.
Can you all?
Of course we can.
Absolutely.
Make a wish.
Okay, I will make a wish, and you might know the wish. It's for all of us.
All of us. Okay.
Yes.
It's for all of us.
Okay.
We're ready.
We should talk. We were posing with Peter Wolf.
Yeah, we are posing
Yes,
Thank
in
you.
front of the
Yes.
candles. Okay. Happy birthday.
This is very, very
Peter
kind.
Wolf.
You know, and in
you got to speak into the mic. This is how mics work, Peter Wolf.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think he knows that.
I guess in the age of COVID, you're supposed to wave the candles rather than
Yeah,
burn
I
them.
think you are.
Yeah.
So when was the last time you had a donut? Tell the truth.
The last time I had a donut was many years ago.
Did you ever learn to drive a car?
I just learned how to drive a car not too long ago.
But that's because you're a city kid. Because you're a Bronx kid. Yeah. That's why you didn't learn how to drive.
Right.
That's right.
And I would take the MTA wherever I had to go, so I didn't need a car.
Well, let me say, I know I speak for Marjorie. We've been huge fans for a long time.
My sympathies.
We love your work. And we're going to, by the way, in a minute, we're going to go out on a solo thing, Peace of Mind, which I totally love. And we've played before with you. But your book is spectacular and huge fun. I mean, huge fun.
A page turner, as they say.
To get it.
A page turner. Yeah, you'll keep reading it way into the night.
So happy birthday and congratulations, Peter Wolf. It's great to see you.
Thank you both, and I hope to see everyone at the Parish Church, and we'll kick it high and have some fun. And thank you for inviting me.
Oh,
this
thank
really
you
means
for
a lot.
coming in.
The two of you are so important. I listen to you all the time.
Oh, thank you.
And
thank you.
We need you now. Your ideas, your voices, more than ever. And I'd like to say, I'm proud to say that I had a reading at the Kennedy Center coming up in 2 weeks.
Please take a minute. We meant to bring it up. We wanted to bring it up, so you did. Go ahead.
I don't want to get political because the idea of this book, there's so much going on. I think this book can be a nice distraction. But I had to cancel because I just could not believe what happened to the people that worked there, and I couldn't feel comfortable being in that great hall after what's going on. So I don't want to leave on that kind of sour note. But thanks to the two of you, there's hope because people have ideas of how we get through. Some people are, happy about what's going on. Some people are not. But it's something we all got to get through together.
We were really proud of what you did around your Kennedy Center thing. Peter, happy birthday. Great to see you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the birthday donuts.
Okay.
Birthday donuts.
And crawlers, too.
Exactly.
I want to tell everybody again, the First Parish Church, Tuesday, March 11th, 7 o'clock. Doors open at 6:15. Get tickets at www.harvard.com/events. We have been speaking to Peter Wolf, the book, and it is.
You want to say something about it?
No, I was just going to say, and don't forget the great Peter Guralnick, because I'm so honored that he's going to be there.
That is right. The book, Waiting on the Moon, Artists, Poets, Drifters, Grifters, and Goddesses by the great Peter Wolf. Thank you very much for coming in today.
Peter, great
thank
to
you
see
for having me.
Take
And
care.
thank you for the birthday celebration. Yamagama Guma Luma to you both. And to everybody listening.
I'm embarrassed to say, is Am I the A-hole segment? That is next. It's about a mother-in-law.
Peter can deal with that.
Wanted to be
I'm Judy Ewell in for Arun Roth. Coming up on All Things Considered, we'll hear local reaction to Mayor Michelle Wu's testimony before Congress yesterday. A new report shows that Boston's boys and men are falling behind in education, employment, and health. Also, Oscar-winning director Bong Joon-ho is back with a new movie about space exploration and aliens who look like croissants. That story and all the day's news starting at 4 on GBH 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Bridgewater State University, helping create jobs for Massachusetts. BSU's skilled graduates are recruited by today's industry leaders, elevating business in Boston and beyond. bridgew.edu/elevate. And the Simmons Leadership Conference, a one-day event filled with inspiration, skill building, and networking. Thursday, March 20th, in person in Boston and online. InclusiveLeadership.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. Before we get to the last segment, a bunch of you texting us again for information on Peter's book launch. It's Tuesday night in conversation with Peter Gorelnik. It's the Great First Parish Church, which is 1446 Massachusetts Avenue. And to get tickets, harvard.com/events, harvard.com/events. And you should get the book too. It is such a fun,
by the
great
Harvard
thing.
bookstore too. If people want to call with any questions.
So, tomorrow we're back at the Boston Public Library. Marty Barron, former editor of the Washington Post and the Globe, of course, is going to Zoom in. Gina McCarthy, former head of the EPA, is going to talk to us. Former ambassador to Spain, Ellen Solomon, is going to talk about what's going on in the Middle East and live music. And then Tuesday, Ask the Mayor, and Wednesday, both an hour of Ask the Governor and an hour of Ask the General Manager.
A lot of asking.
Of the T. We're ending today with a special kind of choose your own a-hole edition of Marjorie's favorite segment. 3 people, maybe even 4, but 3 people stand accused of potential a-holery. Usually we steal an allegedly true story from Reddit. By the way, allegedly true, we think it's true. We don't know, but who knows? But today's comes from the New York Times ethicist column. A woman is due to give birth in a few weeks, Marjorie, and her mother-in-law has asked the husband, very politely, if she could be there to witness the birth of her first grandson. The mother-bee is not just opposed to having her husband's mother in the delivery room, she also wants weeks alone after the birth before letting her mother-in-law into her child's life. So the question is, who is the a-hole here? The 3 options. Is it option A, the grandmother-to-be inserting herself where she is not welcome? Is it option B, the mother-to-be for being so, I'd say, sort of, controlling or demanding? Or is it option C, the husband for being a wimpy go-between where he doesn't tell his mother that my wife and I just don't want you here? And so the number for you to choose, your a-hole of choice, is 877-301-8970. Who's the a-hole, Marjorie? I think it's all 3 of them, Jim. Not just one, all 3.
The major a-hole here is clearly the mother-in-law.
Oh, good for you.
Absolutely.
You're a mother-in-law now.
I am. I was not in the delivery room, and I don't think a lot of women don't even want their husband or their partner in the delivery room because really there's not much they can do.
So why she's the a-hole?
She's the a-hole because
Why?
she's inserting herself. If a woman giving birth wanted someone in their delivery room with them, they could ask that person. You don't insert yourself in a moment like that. Plus, as you said in the introduction, she wants to stay with this couple for 2
I
weeks
didn't mention that. I forgot
after
that
the
part, yeah.
baby is born. What is wrong with her? I mean, this woman, you should let the couple decide what they want to do. Do they want to have people in the delivery room at all? Do they want to have anybody at their house at all? It's not up to her. What would you say, Jim?
I would say the clear a-hole, actually, this may surprise you, is not the mother-in-law. I'm not crazy about her. It's the wimpy husband. If you and the mother-to-be, otherwise known as your wife, say you don't want the guy's mother there, instead of putting the burden on the woman who's about to give birth, grow a few and call your mother on the phone and say, we love you, Mom. And by the way, the woman giving birth says she loves the mother, just, I don't want her here now, mother-in-law. You say to your mother,
she said she's
Mom,
totally controlling even from 500 miles away.
If you read the New York Times thing, she likes her, though. But in any case, the husband should call his mother and say, Mom, we'd love to have you here in a few weeks, but we need some privacy, the 2 of us and the kids. So the clear a-hole, in my estimation, is the husband. 877-301-8970. You have a look of consternation on your face.
No, you're right. She did say she liked them, the mother-in-law, even though she's controlling from 500 miles away. Listen to this.
Yeah.
I can't call for fear that my mother-in-law might hear me. But our birth plan was to explicitly not tell my in-laws when I was in labor, so they would not drive in to expect to be there for the birth. Absolutely not. Mother of twins with overbearing mother-in-law.
Wow.
I think a lot of people like privacy in the delivery room. They don't want, 6 people in there. Or if they do want 6 people in there, they can ask themselves, right?
877-301-8970. Again, this is a rare moment where there's 3 possible choices of who is the a-hole. The mother-in-law who is inserting herself, as Marjorie called it, the woman who does not want her there, who's about to give birth, and her husband, the son of the mother-in-law, who doesn't have the you-know-whats to tell his mother. You're just not welcome right now. What are you laughing
Here's
about?
a good one. One of the texters says, it seems a majority of your Who is the A-hole segment are about mothers-in-law. They want to know if the person choosing this particular segment has an a-hole mother-in-law.
We did the salsa thing when she was combining the spicy and the non-spicy salsa.
That's right.
It's just by chance. It is what it is.
Mother-in-law, it's not easy being a mother-in-law, let's face it.
You're not you stand your distance, right?
Well, I hope I'm not a jerk mother-in-law. I don't know. You'd have to ask my daughter.
If you're listening, daughter, if you could call in.
She's not listening.
What is she doing?
My children never listen to me.
They don't?
No.
One of my kids doesn't even know what I do, much less one does listen to the show. The other, like, what do you get a paycheck, Dad? It's not quite that bad, but it's close. In any case, Amy in a car, you are first on Who is the A-hole here on Boston Public Radio. Take it away, Amy.
Hey, it's Amy. I'm the one who gave you the recipe for the apple cider donuts with ice cream in the middle.
Hi, Amy.
Hi. Okay, so I have something to say. I don't think anybody's the a-hole. I think that the mom-to-be should do what I did. I told both my mom and my mother-in-law that they were not welcome. It was just my husband and I. It was our first opportunity, our first child, first grandchild.
Yeah.
And they were like, okay. And then after that, I said, we don't want to see anybody for 2 weeks once we're home.
Same like this woman.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Exactly.
So when you say, wait, Amy,
ourselves.
how did you say that to these two mothers? And what kind, were you stern or were you sweet? How were you?
I was, well, because of their personalities, I had to be pretty stern and say, look, this is our one opportunity and we love you, but we want it to be just us.
I
think that's pretty kind and direct. I like that. Amy, it's good to hear.
How do you feel about if they're not too far away, dropping off food? It seemed to me that could be something that could be very useful. Bring over some lasagna or some nice chicken soup or something like that. How about that, Amy? If they just left it at the doorstep.
They both lived kind of far away, so we had friends that did that.
Yeah.
So we were truly on our own for 2 weeks, and it was pretty awesome, for my husband and I.
Yeah.
Hey,
yeah,
congratulations,
I think that's nice.
Amy. I think you handled it beautifully. Thank you very much for the call. We appreciate it. 877-301-8970.
Not that I asked or wanted to be there, says a mother-in-law, but my son-in-law said, you weren't there when the baby was conceived, and you will not be there when he is delivered. So there you go.
Good,
that's a pretty good one, too. Yeah.
Okay, Donna in the car, you're next. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Hi, guys. I'm going to say something that I never thought I would say before, which is I agree with Jim on this.
Thank you, Donna. I'm honored. Why?
So I agree because I feel that if he doesn't establish some boundaries right now, they're going to have problems the entire life. And look, if they're afraid to do it, then there is a cop-out, which is when they get to the hospital, they need to tell the nurses, let the nurses go out and tell intrusive mother-in-law, I'm sorry, we are making a medical decision. You're not allowed in there. I just think that they should handle it the other way.
You know, you made a better point than I did in arguing that the a-hole is the husband, is it sets a precedent. You're right. And there are no boundaries ever if there aren't boundaries on this incredibly critical time. That was a brilliant phone call, Donna. Thank you. When Donna said it pains me to agree with Jim, Jamie just wrote us a note. It brings me a strange level of joy when the audience is pained to agree with Jim. What is wrong with me, Jamie says.
That's a good one.
Thank you.
Here's Lisa from Middletown, Rhode Island. When I was pregnant with my daughter, my sister wanted her daughter in the delivery room. My niece wasn't even 10 years old. Needless to say, I said, no, come for a visit afterwards. It is odd that anybody would ask anybody to be in the delivery room. I mean, you're not at your best in the middle of labor, generally
speaking. Well, it's also a pretty intimate kind of thing, right?
No kidding.
Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of people would prefer their husbands weren't there.
Yeah.
Come in when it's over, because the poor husbands get blamed, and there's nothing for them to do but just kind of stand around.
You know, despite what Marjorie's saying here, I want to point a slight inconsistency. Marjorie did say at one of her holiday parties, if she had had one of her 3 kids while she worked here, she would have invited the whole staff in. But that was a different time.
Okay.
Lynn in a car, welcome to the show. Nice to hear from you. Hi.
Hi, this is Lynn, and you are so great. Thank you for being on the air.
You're very kind.
I wanted to say something. I wanted to say something that my son and daughter-in-law said to me.
Yeah.
We can only come to the hospital and we cannot see them for 2 weeks. They wanted to bond with their child.
Great.
I was very upset, but I went to the hospital. I saw my beautiful little girl, and I was about to go home, but we said, we'll drive you home first. So we drove them home with all the gifts that came. And we're sitting there, and we're about to leave, and my son had been in the back with my daughter-in-law, and my son comes out and says to me, Mom, by the way, can you stay a couple of more days? I said, sure. Then, after 3 days, he said, Ma, can you stay a couple of more days? I said, okay. And then I had to go shopping because I had no underwear or shirts to wear.
I don't think we need to know that, but go ahead.
Okay, but anyhow,
I'm kidding. Go ahead.
So it wound up to be 2 weeks that they needed us to be there.
But the beautiful thing, Lynn,
thrilled.
is it was her choice, right?
Of course it's her choice.
That was beautiful.
It's always the mother's choice.
Lynn,
it was funny.
That's a good story.
It was fun.
Thank you, and congratulations on the kid, too. We appreciate it. Lynn, thanks so much for the call. 877-301-8970 is the number.
Okay, from Susan in New Hampshire. As a retired OBGYN, I've seen it all in the delivery room. The mother-in-law is the a-hole. The husband is a close second. A woman loses enough control in every sense with pregnancy, childbirth, and parenting. She should at least have total agency with respect to her birth experience.
Do you know of any experience, any kid being born where a parent was, not a parent, I don't mean a parent, a grandparent was actually in the room?
I've heard of people having their other siblings there. I don't get that either. I don't know anybody like that, but I've heard of that where they'll have like a, and a lot of times those are home births, you know.
Well, that's a little bit different, I guess.
Yeah.
By the way, if any of you had a kid and did have people other than your partner with you, we'd love to hear from you, even though that's not really who is the a-hole.
But I've heard of people that have their sister or their mother instead of their partner. I've heard of that.
Really?
Yeah.
Why? Because they think that the partner will be
because some
not
husbands,
helpful?
you know, they're not very. They flip out. You know, they're not used. They don't want to see their wife in pain. They don't want. It's kind of a basic biological thing.
Or there's obviously another reason. The Celtics game may be on.
The Celtics game.
The husband's got to watch the Celtics.
That's right. The Celtics were in the championship when I had my son. I had to call them. Excuse me. Excuse me. I'm having the baby now. Everybody's in the hallway. Hello? Duke's PK, if I botched that maybe, in Boston. Hi.
Pronounce your name so we get it right, please.
No, she said it perfectly.
Oh, my God.
She's speaking great.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Hi, welcome.
No, welcome. First-time caller, long-time listener.
Oh, thank you
I'd
a
like
lot.
to say that.
Thank you.
This experience was it's an emotional thing because at the time, my ex-wife, her mother was trying to impose herself. And the best excuse that we use is because my mother was a head nurse.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't have the experience in case there was an emergency. And so she would have to come 6 months later. So it wasn't easy for the daughter to say, Mom, you can't come. But using that nurse medical experience, we were able to delay it for 6 months. And even after the 6 months of delaying it, she still didn't fall through.
Hey, Dispicate, thank you for your call. First call. Make another one soon. We hope you will. Thank you so much for joining us. 877-301-8970 is our number.
Absolutely. The husband, says Pat from Portsmouth, Rhode Island, stand up to your mom and up for your wife. I've had 3 kids. I always ask others when I should drop off dinner on the front porch whenever they have a viewing of the baby to let me know.
A viewing. You know, it's incredible. How many people said before, how many of these are about mothers-in-law? I don't know how many are. You know what is a common theme? Weak husbands.
Well, somebody just said that.
Weak husbands.
There seems to be a theme with this segment with controlling mothers-in-law and wimpy sons. The husbands need to grow a spine, break the cycle, says James from Marblehead.
Whoa, that's
who is a
pretty
man,
tough
obviously.
to assume so.
Katie from Situate. What do you think, Katie?
Hello, Katie.
Hey, guys. It's your favorite aggressive cleaner.
Hey,
great.
Jim, you did ask to call in if you had somebody else in the delivery room beside your spouse. So
yeah.
I kind of feel like everyone's being the a-hole. I think this lady probably has never had kids before and doesn't realize if somebody wants to make you food and do your laundry for a week after, that's amazing. If you don't want anyone in the delivery room, that's a different situation. I luckily had my cousin, who's a labor and delivery nurse, in the delivery room with my husband and I for both of my births up from Virginia into Rhode Island. But I come from a very large Irish Catholic family here in Rhode Island. everyone and their mother was at Women and Infants the second I had those kids. And my best friends came on the night of the Golden Globes with a bottle of Cabernet because I did it all naturally. And I was like, if you don't show up with red wine, we got a problem. So I might be a little different. It was kind of a big party to watch the Golden Globes. But, I had my cousin in the delivery room with me.
But a cousin who had expertise in what was happening. Exactly. That, Katie, that was a great call as always. Thanks for making it. We appreciate it. 877-301-8970.
Okay, let us go to Caitlin in Cambridge. Hi, Caitlin.
Hey, Caitlin.
Hi, first time, long time.
Thank you.
I can't quite believe I'm doing this. But so I grew up here in Cambridge, and I have an older sister. My mother was present with my sister and her husband for both of the births because we are just a very close family. And then when my wife and I had our oldest daughter, I gave birth, and my wife was there, and my mother was there too, and she had ALS actually at that time, and it was really beautiful to be able to have her there, and the nurses at Mount Auburn took great care of her while they were also taking care of me and my wife and our newborn. So,
but Caitlin, you asked your mother, or did your mother ask you?
Well, I asked her, but I knew she wanted me to ask her.
I mean, that's a whole different thing to me. If it's the woman who says, "I'd love to have you here, Mom," or even mother-in-law, or even Aunt Bertha, you know what I mean? But it's got to be kind of your decision, I think, right? So that's a great story, Caitlin.
Caitlin, thanks for sharing that. Mount Auburn is my hospital too. I should say I haven't given birth there, but I've done a lot of other things there. That's a great place.
Now, several people have mentioned they had their mother at the delivery of their children, and they think it was great for the birthing mother and great for the mother.
Well, Caitlin just said her mother.
Her
was
mother.
There. Yeah.
That's different than your mother-in-law, obviously.
Well, except your partner's mother is the mother-in-law, and maybe you have
I don't think you feel.
But the key thing is what you just said to
your
Caitlin.
Mother-in-law.
Well, maybe you do.
As you feel to you
but
do.
I don't know. But what you just said, I think, is pretty important. Who does the invite?
Right.
If you want them there, then anybody you want there can be there, right? I mean, isn't that fairly obvious?
Yes, I think you can have whoever you want there. I'm not sure you want to have like 4-year-old children there, though. I think they'd be traumatized.
Did the Celtics win that game when you couldn't get anybody to come when you're about to give birth? Do you have any idea what the outcome of the game was?
I don't know. Dan was born in 1995, or 94? No, 92. So I don't know if they won that year or not, but they were in the playoffs. It was in June. It was in June.
Well,
they were
then
in the
it's
playoffs.
understandable.
And
they wouldn't want to come in.
No, it's understandable. It was a
playoff
I think they're playing
game.
Los Angeles. Were they
Well,
playing
that's a
Los
huge
Angeles?
game.
That
Lakers.
was big. So yeah.
But they eventually came and saw the kid, right?
They did. They
Well,
did. They eventually came. I called them. I said, I called them. Excuse me.
Daniel's
I was
here.
very polite. I was very polite.
Okay, Brenda, you have 30 seconds from Newton. Hi, Brenda. Welcome.
Hi there. I just want to say I had planned a hypnobirth. Can you hear me?
What's a hypnobirth?
Hypnobirth was I was going to be hypnotized, so I told my mom she couldn't come in. My husband and I had gone through a whole plan. I got induced. It was clear I needed an epidural, and there was no hypnobirth happening. So I told my mom she could come in, but she couldn't watch. She couldn't look at the delivery part.
So what did she do? Have to face the wall? What does that mean, Brenda?
I was crazy. I let her hold my leg. My husband held one leg. She held the other leg while I pushed.
That's pretty good. That's a good one, Brenda, to end the discussion.
Here's
Thanks
Erica,
for calling. Appreciate
who says, my mom came in with me after 9 other grandchildren. She sat in the corner saying the Our Father who art in heaven. She did the prayer for the entire time.
We're done, Marjorie.
Oh, we are
Show's
done.
over.
Okay. Thank you.
What's interesting? What's going on around town? We're talking all things arts and culture on The Culture Show, next on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And Gentle Giant Moving and Storage Company, offering local, long-distance, office, and piano moving, with 23 locations throughout New England and across the country. More information at gentlegiant.com. In 2016, Willie Nelson, Alison Krauss, and others gathered in Nashville to honor a beloved songwriter. It's a star-studded concert, and we've got it. Watch Chris Christopherson live and songs tonight at 7:30 on GBH2.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at